seem like much happier cats. Same thing for humans.
Is there like a discussion that's going to happen in here?
Ucchi's here.
Yeah, Uchi's here, getting ready to debate.
SD's not, but it's whatever.
Let me take a piss real quick.
I literally just like put the recording thing in here. Just I don't know, because you guys are having a discussion as well. If you want it to be recorded, like it doesn't mean the debate's starting now.
I think that was pretty good timing, though.
Yeah, Dolan, did you get a chance to read the references I sent you?
He said he just went AFK quickly.
You can probably stop the recording just to save SD some time and just like wait till we start.
It'll be fine.
All right, I'm back.
Dolan, you're back. Nope. Okay.
Ucchi, Dolan, are you guys almost ready?
Ucchi, are you there? It's probably in the bathroom, too.
Yeah, it sounds like Uchi's away from his mic.
Oh no, I see a flash up.
Is Ucchi back? There he is.
Yeah, we're sure Uchi's there. He's listening to us stealthily.
Yeah, he's in the chat. We just haven't heard him speak, so I think he might be away from his mic.
I'm right here.
All right, are you guys both here? You guys ready?
Yep.
All right, Ucchi,
Ready.
Dolan, what is the topic that you guys are going to be debating?
Cardiovascular
So
disease.
it's cardiovascular disease, and I think Dolan's position is that it's heart disease. The cause of it is diabetes, I think, is what you said.
Insulin resistance in general, which includes diabetes and many other diseases.
Is this the only? Are you saying this is the only attribution to or the cause of heart disease, or it is one
It is
of,
the
or the
larger
most
cause.
impactful, or what?
The most impactful, the larger cause, like 90% of cases, you'll find people with cardiovascular disease have insulin resistance. So that's the principle of my point. Is that
Okay, so
most
it's more of a
heart
so it's more of a
disease
core.
is- Go ahead.
Then what do you think is the initial cause of the damage in the endothelial? What do you think is the initial damage in the endothelial wall?
I think it's insulin resistance, excessive blood glucose that destroys this neat little finger-like structure called the glycocalyx, which allows more LDL to get under the epithelial layer. So high blood glucose correlates with insulin too. It's like kind of all encompassed. But insulin resistance is the principal point of my argument, and how its mechanisms and how all the related effects of high insulin contribute to heart disease and cardiovascular disease.
Someone who has high LDL but doesn't have any sort of insulin resistance is safe from cardio heart disease?
Yes, and this is well shown in high-level athletes who have extremely high LDL and cholesterol, but very low blood serum triglycerides, no insulin resistance, no CAC score. So that's why I'm saying LDL as just a plain old marker, like as a single determinant factor in heart disease, is reductionist and kind of nonsensical. It's much more complex than just having high levels of LDL. Much more
Interesting.
complex.
So is this a short-term kind of observation, or is this these athletes? Because we understand that cardio heart disease is a sort of long-term or it takes a while for it to progress.
Right, and so
But
does
it
insulin
is
resistance.
right. It is seen in also younger populations as well, even in children in some cases.
What, insulin resistance or high LDL?
I mean, I suppose both.
Well, they don't necessarily correlate. Like insulin isn't. I mean, if you look at, I linked you an imagery link with my presentation slides that has a neat little study analysis that has like a data point for progression of coronary artery calcification and what the predictable measurements are. And LDL is a terrible biomarker just on its own for determining who has heart disease or who's at the highest risk for having a heart attack. It's really arbitrary, and many of the top lipidologists.
Calcification? Wait, so these people already have had some sort of buildup of plaque in their arteries.
Yeah, check out my slides. So looking at a low CAC score to a super high CAC score, LDL remains relatively consistent across that whole paradigm. There's no changes in CAC score risk with higher levels of LDL. Actually, funny enough, at higher levels of coronary calcification, LDL kind of starts to taper off a little bit towards the higher end of it.
Okay, so in a context of someone who already has some established, I guess, damage to the endothelium, they already have some sort of plaque buildup. LDL is no longer a good predictor of another or a cardio heart event or a reoccurring one.
No, it's not a good predictor, and that's been
Right, that's what I'm
touted by
saying.
many
That's what.
large. Yeah.
Yeah, but in that context, right? In a very specific context or a very specific type of people, right?
What do you mean specific type of people? Like I said, for a majority of people who are suffering from cardiovascular disease, they're also insulin resistant. If you look at their LDL levels, it's all over the place. And not to mention that LDL, HDL, cholesterol, just any sort of blood lipid marker is extremely variable, like day to day. You could eat a bunch of bread today and tank your LDL, and then eat a steak tomorrow, and it goes right back up. Like it's very, very variable. It's not a good metric to determine heart disease risk because it's so widely variable throughout the day, the week, the month, what you ate,
Right.
timing of your meals, if you're fasting beforehand, did you get sunlight that same day? Like there is a massive plethora of things that can impact your lipoprotein levels and cholesterol.
Right.
Do they
I
only
totally.
measure it one time though, or do they do it multiple times to kind of get it like an average?
Well, I didn't hear what you said, Hakan.
Do they measure it multiple times to get like an average, or do they do it one time like you're?
No, most of the time, if you go to the doctor and you get a blood lipid test that scores high with LDL, they'll just immediately give you a statin. Like there's no
That's
independent
actually
other
not.
testing.
That's actually not the case. A lot of times when doctors prescribe statins, it's for people who are in a pretty serious situation. Let's say they have a history or of heart disease. Let's say they have metabolic syndrome. Then it would be an appropriate way if the doctor feels that the person isn't going to change any sort of lifestyle factors. That's when statins are actually prescribed. If it's not like that, I don't think that was a good doctor if you found that to be the case. But most doctors, from what I've seen, personally experienced and talked to with other doctors, that's not the case. That's a kind of a misconception that most people have. Maybe it's based on experience or some propaganda.
Well, yeah, personal anecdote experience. When I was 21 years old, I had high cholesterol and high LDL, and they offered me a statin with no additional testing. They just said, "Hey, you have high LDL and cholesterol. I recommend you take Verastatin or whatever it's called, the primary statin that's prescribed. And I've seen that anecdote with several people in my family. I've read hundreds of them online of people who go to the doctor for one single blood test and automatically get offered a statin because their doctor thinks that high LDL is correlated with a risk of heart disease.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Because there are
Not
other ways
thorough.
to. Okay, that's unfortunate to hear. But that usually doesn't seem to be the case. Um, but anyway, in younger uh, populations where people don't really have any sort of issue, LDL is a pretty good predictor of whether or not you're going to have some sort of future cardiovascular event in the future. But as you get older and there are more factors to account for, LDL, I'll agree, doesn't seem to be that great of a predictor of cardio heart disease events. And I've asked a few doctors on why that's the case or what metric they use, and it's usually based around the Framingham score. I don't think there's this blanket statement where they only look at one specific thing. Um, and
Well, that's been your position for a while. Every time we've had these conversations in chat, you always link studies that correlate LDL with heart disease risk and say, well, if you eat animal foods, it raises LDL and that causes heart disease. That's been the principal point you've always made.
Well, yeah. So I'm talking about. I guess I just assumed that most people, if you ask me what is the leading cause of like heart disease, or no, what is a good metric to look at for a population of people who are already sick, or what's a good metric for looking at heart disease events, or like what's good at predicting this? In certain contexts, it would be LDL, but in some contexts where people are already sick, it wouldn't be. It would be based around the Framingham score.
Well, are you referring to the Framingham score as the ratio of HDL to LDL?
Yeah, or I think it's HDL to triglycerides, but that might be. Yeah. I believe that's what it was. Hold on.
Yeah, and I will agree, like high serum triglycerides, that is a definite corollary factor with risk of heart disease. Like having high levels of blood fat is definitely not good. And kind of the point of my principal point here is that a ketogenic diet, if you've seen anyone's blood work after doing a ketogenic diet, they have very, very low triglycerides. They have high LDL, they have high cholesterol, they have high HDL, but very low triglycerides, and obviously no insulin resistance.
Okay, so I think I'll just get into my paper.
Let's make your point. Yeah, like first let's kind of iron out. So what is your principal position? What do you think is what foods or what markers, whatever it is, what do you think is the principal cause of cardiovascular disease?
I think it's multifactorial. But I think probably the initial contribution to the damage of the endothelial would be a high amount of circulating LDL, whether that be oxidized or non-oxidized. And I think a big contributor of this is foods that are high in saturated fat or high in or at all cholesterol, dietary cholesterol. So I'm going to use my, I guess the first paper that I sent you. That's pretty much where I'm going to base a lot of this around. Did you happen to read it? It's the low density lipoprotein causes atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. That paper?
Yeah, and that's why I was assuming that your principal position is that just high levels of LDL innately cause that sort of dysfunction where LDL can transfer the glycolate or the glycocalyx into the endothelial cell, and then under that to develop an atherosclerotic plaque. So you're just saying LDL by itself, just high levels of blood LDL is what causes that function. It's just innately inflammatory.
Yeah. I do agree that there might be some other contributions, let's say like in the way that LDL becomes oxidized, but yeah, I agree.
Okay, well,
I would say that.
If you look at my debate resources, there is a nice little paper that is, let's see what this one was, August 2018, where they evaluate the various levels of LDL and found no correlations with it having an innately sclerotic or inflammatory effect. Like native LDL in its proper form, obviously there are many different types of LDL that can vary widely between being glycated, oxidized, being large, dense LDL to low. There's many different forms. So just blanketly saying all LDL, including native LDL, which is an incredibly important part of your repair process in your body, there's zero evidence for it just innately by itself causing that inflammation. We can get into the specifics, so which types of LDL can cause heart disease and what causes that, but just blanket statement LDL is what causes heart disease is what we're kind of arguing here.
I think, yeah, and I would still say that native LDL in abundance still contributes to the initial damage of the endothelial. And I think that has been shown to be the case in many types of studies, from epidemiological studies, clinical intervention studies, genetic studies, specific tests on statins. Yeah, and then as to I believe it's either the Ucchi Ravenscoff paper or it's another paper. I forgot which one it was called exactly, but in the paper that I linked, they actually talk about an issue with those kinds of papers where they look at statin trials, or they look at LDL in older populations and find that there are still people dying despite reducing their LDL, and that's sort of the initial problem. So as you get older, like I explained before, LDL by itself is less of a good predictor in general of another cardiovascular disease event. So they use different types of they use different scores to kind of figure out when another one will happen, and then studies that look at statins and their cardio heart disease events. If LDL is not reduced to a certain amount, then there isn't going to be seen a reduction in cardio heart disease events or mortality. So that kind of goes into the Ucchi Ravenscoff paper, or I think I believe it's the second one you linked.
Well, here's the thing. So there's a paper that I linked that did like a full multivariate analysis. And they looked at the individual factors that are the primary contributors and what the statistical significance of each individual metric is causing heart disease. So if you look at hypertension history, it's a 1.9 times increased risk ratio for heart disease events or cardiovascular events. Diastolic blood pressure, so just having high blood pressure is a risk. Total cholesterol is not significant. It's at 1.5x the risk ratio. So LDL in conjunction with that is at a 1.4x risk, which is also considered non-significant. And then if you look at the multivariate analysis between total cholesterol, LDL, and insulin, total cholesterol is a 1x risk ratio, which is non-significant. LDL is a 1x risk ratio, which is non-significant. And then you have insulin and insulin sensitivity, which is a 6.7x risk ratio, which is massively statistically significant. So it's not just having high levels of LDL in your blood, it's having high levels of LDL in your blood in conjunction with insulin resistance and other fundamental dyslipidemia, and also the variations in oxidized LDL, small dense LDL, very large dense LDL. It's not just plainly that LDL is innately inflammatory, and having high levels of it in your blood is the first step in having heart disease. It's really just high blood glucose and excessive insulin is what causes that sort of dysfunction in the glycocalyx, which allows more LDL particles to get into the epithelial under that to develop atherosclerotic plaques made of essentially foam cells.
And then
So
LDL yeah, of course it is. But then native LDL in abundance still has that, but it still has been shown, or it still is recognized as a contributor to endothelial dysfunction. And one way it does this is it reduces the bioavailability of nitric oxide, which prevents the damage of the endothelial wall.
Perhaps, but this is where you have to look into the broader context and all the other variables that play in.
Hey, so that's why I'm
assuming that we're getting enough sunlight and enough magnesium and that we're not having any inflammation. High levels of LDL, it's just it's just the carrier. It's not the principal cause. All it is just transporting energy and cholesterol around the body
but that
to
isn't-
repair things.
But of course,
It's
that
not
doesn't
the
just tell
principal
doesn't
cause.
tell us whether or not high amounts of it is bad or good, right? Just because we demonstrate the function of LDL, right?
And considering that if you look at the CAC risk scores and determining whether or not atherosclerosis is getting better or worse, it is a flat line with LDL being the same average level amongst everyone. And even
And
in the
I already-
highest CAC scores, you can have high levels of LDL or low levels of LDL, and you're still having the development of atherosclerotic plaque. So it's, again, not specific to just LDL being innately inflammatory. I don't think there's a single paper that will just say innately that LDL is an inflammatory molecule. There's no paper that says that. There's no research that says that.
That high amounts of LDL isn't inflammatory.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Find me a paper
I
on
don't know
native
about that,
LDL,
but-
non-oxidized, non-glycated LDL, properly dense LDL. If there's any single paper that says that it innately causes inflammation and the fundamental dysfunction of the epithelial layer, I'll read it, but there's
I
nothing
think
out there that says that.
Did I not send it to you? I swear I actually sent that exact study
Link it in
on
chat.
native LDL doing that.
Because you have low density, you have two papers, one from OUP Academic, and then you have one that you linked me from the role of oxidized LDL and atherosclerosis that you pinged me a couple of days ago. And I read both of them, or the two that you linked, not the one on saturated fat.
Okay.
But
Give me
it's,
one sec. 1 sec. Well, while I'm looking for this, I think I found it. Yeah. I'm not expecting you to read it right now or anything like that. Where should I link it?
VC text, or you can ping it to me. I wish we had a separate channel so we could link the stuff.
Shit. Let me link the specific thing I wanted to highlight. A snapshot of it.
Yeah, endothelial dysfunction. Yeah, and this is where it becomes debatable on what's actually causing the endothelial dysfunction. What's causing the glycocalyx to disappear and allow more LDL into the epithelial to develop plaques and essentially like cholesterol foam cell pimples under your arteries.
This isn't talking about whether it's going in or out. This is talking about elevated amounts of native LDL latching onto the endothelial. Oh wait. Oh, is this a? Okay, cool. Well, I'll link this stuff here.
Yeah, let me make an equivocation then, because I think the broader context of what other factors play into this, I think if you're eating a fuck ton of animal foods and you have very high LDL, low HDL, high triglycerides, high cholesterol, and you sit inside your house all day, don't get sunlight, you're low in magnesium, you have fundamental inflammation, you're consuming carbohydrates with the fats, those things are obviously going to increase your risk of heart disease. But this is where I want to defend my camp and say that if you're a carnivore, that you're eating a high animal foods diet and you have high LDL, and you're what Dave Feldman might call a lean mass hyperresponder, and you're in excellent physical shape, you have no coronary calcification, you have no inflammation, but you have sky high LDL and cholesterol, those people are not at risk for heart disease. There's absolutely no way those people in peak physical condition, performing at the top of their species in terms of physical performance, are at risk for heart disease. It's just
and then this is where we have to talk about what the main picture of this paper, the first paper that I linked to, the low density lipoprotein causes atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. What the main point of this paper was to show its initial contribution to atherosclerosis, right? This is not accounting for people who are already at that stage of metabolic syndrome. This is for the normal population. So people who are already healthy, this is something to worry about. Having high amounts of circulating LDL, whether it's oxidized or not oxidized, is an issue.
It's not. It's just energy transport. And I don't know if
Right,
you
and
ever read
that
Dave
doesn't.
Feldman work. It's so much more complex. And this is what I don't like with this plant-based perspective, I would say, is that it's always boiled down to just animal foods increase LDL. That innately is inflammatory. That causes heart disease. That's what it always boils down to. That's what the principal position is. And what I'm saying is that it's much more complex. I mean, cholesterol is
Sure.
more or less about energy mechanics. It's not about the deliverance of LDL or from cholesterol to be delivered under the plaque. It's multivariate. So when you link a
It
paper
is
that says
well.
that it affects nitric oxide production and that is the mechanism in which it can somehow deposit under the epithelial, it
Destroys the
does not make
endothelial,
sense in the
right?
broader context.
Right.
Well, I
So
mean, if you want to look at
the
what really destroys endothelium in terms of statistical significance, I put a couple of studies in there about the glycocalyx dysfunction, and the principal cause of dysfunction in that is high levels of blood glucose. Like after a carbohydrate meal, your glycocalyx goes down from being finger sized to just nubs to where more of that LDL. If you have higher circulating LDL in conjunction with that dysfunction, yeah, absolutely, that LDL is going to be more likely to form a foam cell and make a plaque pimple in your arteries and potentially burst, giving you a heart attack. But innately, LDL by itself, its own clean native LDL being the principal cause, it's
abundance.
kind of nonsensical.
Okay, so go ahead. Do you have some sort of reason to suggest that LDL by itself in abundance doesn't contribute to any sort of damage or any sort of risk at all? And I'm
Yeah,
not talking about.
I link-
Okay, go ahead.
I
Where'd
linked
you link
the LDL does not cause cardiovascular disease.
Right, yeah, and then I told you that I believe that's the Ucchi Ravenscoff paper, right?
Yes, and I
And
know
what
he's very
he
much
did was,
disliked by you guys, but he's got a pretty great
well,
overview of the statistical significance of it.
because if he looks at, so what he's doing is he's looking at elderly populations who where they don't account for the fact that they could be on statins, or they look at people who are already have metabolic syndrome, right? Again, this paper is for specifically people that aren't at that level yet. These are people who have normal functioning. They don't have diabetes, they don't have high blood pressure, etc.
They did not reference
That's what
insulin
this
resistance
paper is.
once in that paper. They did not talk about insulin resistance or high levels of insulin in the blood causing the fundamental dysfunction in that paper.
Right, because the initial proposal here is to show that high amounts of LDL has a causal risk, is a causal factor in the progression of atherosclerosis, right?
Dependent on one very important other factor, and that is the glycocalyx function from excessive glucose in the blood. That is the most important part of that paper. That is the most important metric that you have to look at when determining whether or not LDL is going to be a problem, is what is their blood glucose? What is their insulin resistance? And they don't mention carbohydrates or insulin resistance once in that paper.
Because again, it's solely based on populate on it's
Yeah, it's
It's like
epidemiology.
it's
It's
no, it's what?
population
Whoa,
metric.
whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, just so you know, I don't know if okay, I'm starting to think that you didn't read this because this was not just this wasn't just a presentation of epidemiological studies. This was a
That's where they base
presentation.
their data off of. They took data
Wait,
from
what? No, it
epidemiology
was
studies and used that to form their hypothesis.
they
And that's what I'm
used
saying the problem
Mendelian
is.
randomized. No, they used randomized control trials. They use drug trials where they use statins. They looked at genetic factors like the PCSK9 gene, or they used a familial hypercholesterolemia.
Right,
So
and I
they
have
didn't
that,
just
by the way.
and they just didn't hinder on, or they just didn't rely on one form of evidence. They used multiple forms of evidence, and then the statin thing is specifically addressed in this paper on Ravenscoff's criticisms. So if you don't have, actually, let me just read it out. It specifically talks about how. If you aren't at a certain I think it's like the reason why LDL isn't, I mean, statins aren't just prescribed to just anyone is because for them to show some sort of effect, the person already has to have a certain amount of cardiovascular event or cardiovascular risk, and that's where it's seen most to be beneficial.
Right. And what am I saying is the largest risk for cardiovascular disease? What is the statistical principal risk? It's insulin.
I don't recognize that as the most impactful or the biggest risk factor for atherosclerosis. I don't see how you're getting that.
Okay.
In a healthy population,
I'll link you the study for it. There's a big data set where they looked at a massive amount of studies and eliminated down to, they looked at ones that measured insulins and ones that didn't. So I think there's like 200 studies in the initial. There was 423 metabolic syndrome papers, and then they selected 70 of those papers that had actually measured insulin instead of other indirect blood markers like glucose. And they found a significant association between insulinemia, hyperinsulinemia, and cardiovascular disease, as well as diabetes, central obesity, sleep apnea, hypertension, fatty liver, dyslipidemia, and certain cancers. This was 67 out of the 70 studies were correlated with high levels of insulin. And that is a principal point of my argument, is that, yeah, if you have high levels of blood LDL, if you have high levels of LDL just circulating your system, and you also have a high level of insulin, yeah, you're gonna more likely have a risk for a heart attack. But if you're low insulin, like perhaps someone on a ketogenic or carnivore diet, if you have literally the lowest insulin you could possibly manage, and you have high levels of LDL, it is not a risk factor.
Do you have any evidence to suggest that?
Yeah.
Because I have an interesting paper where they looked at a some population in China, I believe, where the population that had, despite having metabolic syndrome, they had fairly low levels of LDL. Despite this, they had lower incidences of cardiovascular events. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to get this link.
Okay.
Hey, is Dolan still using that Ravenscov study?
Yeah.
No, that's one of them. That was one that I linked about LDL not being the principal cause, but I've linked many more data sets about what is the first presupposing factor. What is the first risk factor for having risk of heart disease? And I'm saying it's insulin, just full stop.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's insulin still.
Yeah, I thought I went over that one with you, Dolan, and I showed you how there was quite a few problems with that study.
Right, and it's totally fine if you can determine that somehow he cherry-picked data sets. But again, we're getting back to the principal point. What is the first thing that causes dysfunction in the whole LDL hypothesis?
The point I'm making is if it's something that's obviously a trash study where he's cherry-picked a whole bunch of stuff, then you probably shouldn't be using it to push an agenda.
That was, again, the single point that I linked about LDL not being a causal factor. It's not the causal factor. That was the principal point I was making.
Yeah, but if you're using that as your supporting evidence, then I would say that you should probably drop that one. Then you should probably just drop that full stop.
Okay,
No,
this is a debate
right?
with
No.
Ucchi and Dolan, so people should probably...
That's fine. I'm just wondering why Dolan is using a study that he knows has been used.
No,
as
it's definitely relevant.
Mechanism.
You can make any one of your points about
I don't know,
being a ketogenic diet pusher and saying that he's somehow compromised. It doesn't change the.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to go over it again.
It doesn't change it.
Starting the study within it, and just
you can add
take
him
it
in
apart again.
The text channel if you want.
We'll talk later. So to get back to what we've been kind of driving this whole time, if we're speaking in context of which diet is going to cause heart disease, do you think innately that if someone was eating a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet, that they're at a higher risk for heart disease than someone that was eating a standard American diet?
Sure. Yeah, I do believe that.
Run through the mechanism
because I still believe that high amounts of saturated fats and high amounts of dietary cholesterol still contribute to the high amounts of LDL, high amounts of circulating LDL, which contributes to endothelial damage, endothelial dysfunction of the nitric oxide.
Again, we're circling back to essentially the same point.
Because I'm not sure.
I've linked data, and I've linked two studies, and I've linked data about
and I'm looking at it right now.
looking at large scale fuck tons of metabolic studies
Well,
looking at what the
yeah.
individual
So
risk
what
factors
the
are.
problem, right? But what the problem is this isn't just looking at what the initial cause is. This is looking at what are predictive. These are like populations of people that already have some sort of metabolic syndrome, right? They have some sort of progression of atherosclerosis already. So what I want to look at is what the initial contribution of atherosclerosis is.
Initial contribution?
Sorry, not contribution. The initial cause of it. Sorry.
Right, and I've put out my position as to what all the initial causes are, and this is, I mean, if you just look at historical data at when dietary habits have changed in the United States or across the world, our heart disease risk went through the fucking roof when we started eating excessive carbohydrates, lots of seed oils, which are insulinogenic too. All of our heart disease risk, all of our cancer risk, diabetes, mental health disorders, all of this correlates with a massive spike in the number of carbohydrates people are eating. If you look at all the data before that, the United States used to eat metric fuck tons of saturated fat. If you look at other countries like Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, they eat metric fuck tons of saturated fat, yet their heart disease risk is some of the lowest in the world. If it was purely just having high LDL, which I'm sure you can go find data on all the French, the South Koreans, the Japanese, you could go find that. I'm sure they have really high LDL and cholesterol, but they have almost zero insulin resistance, meaning that they're not at risk for heart disease. So my principal point is that the first step in determining what your risk for heart disease is one, having high levels of blood glucose and subsequent insulin. Step two, that high level of blood glucose and insulin causes dysfunction in a little bunch of microvilli in your arteries called the glycocalyx. When those are dysfunctioned, when those do not properly regulate the amount of LDL going from the bloodstream into the epithelial to make foam cells, that is the principal cause. There's no relation with just LDL being the first predictive cause measurement mechanistic part of what constitutes heart disease. It's insulin resistance, and that's why you gotta. This is why I always default to the evolutionary arguments, is because we were eating tons of animal foods. We are outside every day. We're getting plenty of magnesium. All of these things were reducing our risk for heart disease. If you look at other countries, like I said, like Japan, France, who eat tons of cheese, Hong Kong eats tons of red meat, they don't have heart disease risks with their consumption of animal foods and subsequent high LDL or other lipids.
And then you look
So
at, for example, the I don't know if you looked at this before, but the genetic factors that were presented in that paper that I showed you, the initial paper that I showed you, these people, this is probably the most powerful form of evidence that we have. They have genetically high levels of LDL, and this isn't even accounting for metabolic syndrome. These people just genetically have higher amounts of LDL, and they still have higher risks of cardio heart disease, right?
Okay, so have you seen the information or any of the studies or like the NHANES data about people who live longest have the highest LDL? And those same people with those high LDL mutations, where they have higher levels of it, actually end up living longer too? Does that not have any
I've not.
validity?
Go ahead and show me that. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, stand by.
So they have like what genetic factor did they have?
They had that mutation that caused high levels of blood LDL. And if you look at the NHANES data, Dave Feldman did an awesome analysis of it. He found that the people with the highest level of LDL past age 60, I believe, they had less all-cause mortality. Here's a Medium article about it. Let me link it. And I'm sure if you just Google this too, like higher cholesterol associated with longer life, you'll find a lot of studies about it.
Oh, I've seen this paper before. Where am I looking for the genetic thing?
No, that was just part of it. And that's why they were looking for the NHANES data. I'll have to see Dave Feldman's presentation on it to get the exact paper. But he did his own data analysis on those data sets provided from Haynes, and like I said, he found that higher levels of also HDL, higher levels of HDL in conjunction with higher levels of LDL and blood cholesterol, obviously having low triglycerides, because I do think having high levels of blood triglycerides is an independent risk factor for heart disease. You do not want lots of fat in your blood, but the data
we don't
on
want high levels
LDL and
of
cholesterol are
LDL
associated with
either.
longer lifespan. Let me get it real quick. And to Josh, I don't know what you're talking about saying that doctors just have you. Maybe you got a good doctor, but doctors offer me pills like fucking crazy, man. You go to the doctor and they do your blood work and they see you have high cortisol. They try to give you some glucocorticoid. When I had high LDL, they wanted to give me a statin in just one appointment. And I'm not the only one with this anecdote. This is a very common behavior of doctors. They look at one single blood work panel and they go, "Oh, you need this pill. Now get out of my office." All right, I have a lot. So do you want me to link all of them? I have like 10 here. You just want me to link the most definitive one? Here's a good one. Serum cholesterol, high density lipoprotein, cholesterol, and triglycerides. Higher levels associated with longevity.
Right, but we were looking at the genetic people with the genetic issue to have higher amounts of either LDL or lower amounts of LDL, having some sort of risk or lower amounts of risk for cardiovascular disease events.
Yeah, I'm trying to find what do you know what they call the mutation? I can't remember the name
one
of it.
called there's the PCSK9 gene.
Or Smith-Lindley-Opitz. Is that one of them?
Well, I think that's one too. I think. Wait, what was that? I heard about that one. Someone linked that to me before.
Yeah, Smith-Lindley-Opitz syndrome.
What's
it's
the
cholesterol reductase deficiency. It's where you can't make enough, not make too much. It's the opposite.
Make enough what?
Where you
LDL?
don't make enough cholesterol. Like your body can't natively make a lot of cholesterol. You have to get it dietarily, otherwise you die.
Kind of, huh? Okay, I don't know how that would help with the LDL argument, but okay.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying. Like the Smith-Lindley-Opitz, I was wrong on what it was called. I don't know what the genetic variation with higher LDL is called. I'm trying to find it. But I do know I've got 10 studies here showing higher levels of HDL, higher levels of LDL, higher levels of cholesterol, lower levels of blood triglycerides, all associated with longer lifespans, which completely contradicts just the innate hypothesis that high levels of LDL in your blood is going to increase your risk for cardiovascular disease, which is factored into all-cause mortality and how soon you die. Here's one of the good ones. This is research done. I don't know if you've also looked into other countries' research. Like if you look into Japan or South Korea or France's research, like they have a much different perspective on food over there. And I'm sure you know that they eat a lot of saturated fats, right? Like they eat a lot of cheese, they eat a lot of meat, fish, eggs, and they have the lowest heart disease risk of any populations.
All right, just let me know when you have the paper.
I'm linking some in VC links for cholesterol guidelines.
Well, yeah, we're looking at the genetic. I think the topic was looking at the genetic component or people with some sort of genetic mutation. I think the PCSK9 gene, for example, explaining how someone with lower LDL would have a lower risk of mortality or cardiovascular disease events or risks at all.
Okay, I found the paper on genetic causes of high, but it's for HDL. None of them are for LDL. Perhaps it was just for HDL, not LDL.
Okay.
Here's one. Here's Herald Tribune's health. Let me read through this. Yeah, it was a BMJ. Here it is. It's a PDF, so you have to copy that link and download it.
Right, so what am I looking at?
Yep, so lack of an association or an inverse association between low-density lipoprotein cholesterol and the mortality in the elderly. It's another study that Ucchi Ravenscoff did, different from the other one that I linked. But he's the one that references the LDL-C being associated with higher levels or lower levels of all-cause mortality. Seems like we're just at the point now. If I link anything from Ucchi Ravenscoff, you're just gonna immediately dismiss it for.
No, I haven't dismissed. No, we were talking about genetic mutations and people who have genetic mutations that lower or increase their LDL.
Yeah, and they talk about it in this paper, the one that Ucchi did.
Okay, where in that paper?
Let me find it.
The PCSK9 gene, or is it a different one?
No, it's just like familial hypercholesterolemia and high
Oh,
LDL.
okay.
I don't know if it references that exact gene. You just call it the PCSK9.
Yeah, yeah. Highlight something. I'm just looking through it right now. I only see one reference to hypercholesterolemia. Mortality is significantly
Here's
lower in
one,
individuals.
but it seems to reference rats quite a bit.
Okay. So, what did you want to highlight from this animal study?
Yeah, it's pretty widely varied. Like the PCSK9 gene, they just refer to it as familial hypobacterioproteinema. Holy fuck, that's a word.
Okay.
That's what the NIH refers to it as, with that mutation. So I don't know if it's specific to just LDL. It regulates a lot of other things too besides LDL, it looks like. Yeah, the only thing I can find on the PCSK9 polymorphisms is studies with statins. There's none specifically on that mutation having longevity, but I know Dave Feldman had a talk about it where he referenced that mutation and higher LDL in those same in the same NHANES data where they had lower all-cause mortality. I'll just link you Dave Feldman stuff. You just want to move on since there's no definitive link. Being that I made the claim that that gene was associated with longer lifespan, I can't find any study on it. But I do know
Okay.
there are quite a bit of studies of just higher LDL, higher levels of blood serum cholesterol being associated with longer lifespan. So I think that's kind of important to bring into the context of just LDL being innately bad and having high levels of it being the cause of heart disease, because that would not correlate with lower all-cause mortality for having higher levels.
Sure, we can go into why you think having high amounts of LDL is beneficial. Sure.
Yeah, so here's a paper. High cholesterol may protect against infections and atherosclerosis. So 2003 paper. These two concepts, so it says many researchers have suggested that blood lipids may play a key role in the immune defense system. There's a growing understanding that inflammatory response of arterial intima to injury is a crucial step in the genesis of atherosclerosis, and that infections may be one type of injury. These two concepts are difficult to harmonize with low-density lipoproteins, with the LDL heart disease hypothesis, according to which high LDL cholesterol is the most important cause of atherosclerosis. However, the many observations that conflict with the LDL receptor hypothesis may be explained by the idea of high serum cholesterol or high LDL is protective against infections and atherosclerosis. So this is why I talk about it's a lot more complex than just having plain old high LDL. It's multifaceted in the sense of how it fundamentally gets past the epithelial layer and develops those plaques.
Okay. So, where in the paper does he mention how having high amounts of LDL?
It's important. It's protective of a bunch of different things. So for one, it regulates your immune system. Having high levels of cholesterol is good for immune function. There is quite a bit of clinical evidence about C-reactive protein and LDL being correlated. So the higher levels of LDL that you have, usually the lesser amount of inflammation that you have. And I can link some of the key takeaways from the paper too, in terms of like what the predictive factors are. But and just to kind of equivocate with you, I do think that you could cure your heart disease on a vegan diet or a plant-based diet too, by the way. I think if you adequately keep your carbohydrates low and you get exercise and sunlight in combination with cutting out a lot of the high insulinogenic foods, which is usually just fat and carbohydrates combined together, you can definitely lower your risk. But this is why I always come back. You can't just say that eating animal foods or that eating foods that raise your LDL is just going to give you heart disease. That's unfounded. And it's also shown in quite a bit of anecdotes from people who get blood work and CAC scores. If they're eating a carnivore diet, they tend to have no inflammation, no insulinemia, but they have high LDL and high cholesterol. Would you agree that high blood triglycerides are probably a better marker to look at than LDL? If you were to rank which ones were the most important to you in terms of determining the risk, what would you think is the higher factor?
In what context, though?
In any context, do you think that having high levels of blood triglycerides, I will agree that that's pretty well associated with cardiovascular disease. And there's mechanisms for it.
Right. I suppose it could be bad, but I think high amounts of LDL seems to be a pretty big risk factor still. So I don't know where you're going with this exactly.
It's not the only risk factor, and I agreed with you earlier in the debate,
I'm not
saying if you
saying
have
that
high
it's
levels
not.
of LDL with insulin,
Yeah.
then
Yeah,
yeah.
I recognize that as well, but I still like in the paper again, it's the main point of this is to establish its initial causal role in like a regular population of people who don't already have metabolic syndrome or high amounts of insulin.
But again, so like if you look at people, this is where you kind of have to try to see the forest from the trees in a sense. Like if you're let's say you're a high level athlete, and there's a study on ketogenic athletes who have just remarkably high levels of LDL. Sorry, excuse my cat. They have remarkably high levels of LDL because they're high level athletes, and that LDL is transporting cholesterol around the body, trying to repair things. Because exercise is innately inflammatory in a beneficial hormetic way, and your body has to repair that. So it's associated. So just having high levels of LDL, especially if you're a high level athlete, it cannot be a causal or determinant factor. But if you're some fat dude that sits in your house all day that eats nothing but meat and potatoes and you don't get any sunlight, yeah, you're going to have a risk for a heart attack. But you have to look at the specifics and equate to insulin as the fundamental cause. And this isn't like a controversial opinion either. Like, there's a lot of lipidologists who agree with this, like Bruce Brundage, like Harvey Hecht, Robert Kraft, or I think Andrew Kraft from the 1970s. He did a bunch of studies on insulinemia and subsequent cardiovascular disease, and he essentially said in like full stop. Let me find the. He said those with cardiovascular disease not identified with diabetes are simply undiagnosed. Joseph R. Kraft, he did a lot of really interesting research on cardiovascular disease in relation to diabetes.
I'm kind of confused on where we're even at this point, because we're kind of jumping all over the place.
Yeah, because it's multifactorial. You have to have a lot of perspectives coalescing into one.
I think that's why I was confused when you told me your position, because I thought the initial conversation that we started with was what is the initial contribution to atherosclerosis.
Yeah, and I said pretty unequivocally that it's insulin resistance, and the data shows that in the causal risk
I
factors.
haven't, yeah, but I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that to be the case. I'm seeing that it may have. I'm seeing that I understand that there may be better predictors in general, but I don't see that to be the case for most people who don't fit in that criteria of or in the population of people who already have issues.
Okay, so I linked it. If you want to read through this with me, if you go down to the conclusion and look at the massive amount of studies that they included and all the multivariate analysis that they did, they pretty unequivocally said hyperinsulinism was the most important factor associated with the occurrence of new cardiovascular events in the Colombian patients' AMI, which emphasizes the pivotal role of insulin resistance in the physiopathologic mechanisms of atherosclerosis, especially in underdeveloped countries. This paper lays out the data and the risk ratios pretty clearly that LDL is a non-significant association with cardiovascular risk. It's just not a good metric. And any lipidologist that you talk to will say, yeah, LDL is a terrible biomarker. It's widely variable. It's all over the place. It doesn't correlate with CAC scores. It doesn't correlate with any of that. But if you look at the other metrics like hypertension, having high blood pressure, that is a pretty significant risk factor, which also correlates with insulinemia. And then you look at the multivariate analysis and what's the highest risk. Cholesterol was 1 time, LDL was 1 times, insulin was 6.7 times, which is massively statistically significant. And if you look at the paper, it talks about the ratios and what percentage of heart disease is contributory to this. And it essentially says more than like 90% of cardiovascular disease is determinate by insulin resistance. Just full stop.
And the participants in this, or at least a good amount of people seem to be taking medications in this. They were taking insulin, lipid-lowering medications as well, right?
The one I just linked,
So,
the one
yeah, so
labeled
these are people.
hyperinsulinemia.
Yeah, so these are people that are already sick, right?
Right. And then
Yeah,
I've
so
linked
we're
2 other papers earlier in
recently just
VC
now?
links.
Right.
Again,
Okay.
here is the biggest one. Let me link it. So here's one by Henry N. Ginsberg. Associates atherosclerosis being principally caused by insulin resistance. This one is association between insulin resistance and the development of cardiovascular disease from a 2018 paper. Essentially outlines pretty clearly that high levels of plasma triglycerides, which is associated with hyperinsulinemia, is another principal cause. And just, again, to kind of get back to our principal point and more or less what we're both debating here, you're a vegan, I eat a heavily animal-based diet. I'm arguing from my side saying that our diet, high in animal foods, which causes no insulin resistance, which keeps your inflammation very low, is not going to cause heart disease. If your diet was a vegan diet and was really high in carbohydrates, moderate amounts of fats, like if you had a balance ratio of like 20% fats and 40% carbohydrate and then another 40% protein, I think your risk would actually be much higher for cardiovascular disease compared to me with very low insulin.
Oh, this is talking about. I don't. I'm looking at the association between insulin resistance and the development of cardiovascular disease. They're talking about the what's that triad called? What's called? Vertrad's triad, I think. I mean, I'm still not getting to the point where I'm seeing like what specifically did you want me to look at here? Because you linked like like 5 different papers. Which paper did you want me to specifically look at for your
The
point
first one,
that
the one that's
okay, the first
titled
one.
Insulin Resistance and Cardiovascular Disease.
All right, let's look at the first one. Okay. Okay, what did you want to highlight here specifically?
Go down to the bottom where it gives the summary and the conclusion. It says insulin resistance in the artery wall here. This is probably the most important part of it. There's increasing evidence that insulin resistance may be directly atherogenic. The results of the IRS suggest a direct relationship between insulin resistances as measured by frequently sampled intravenous glucose tolerance tests in carotid artery intima and media thickness, even after adjusting for several associated risk factors. Although those results could simply indicate that there is another risk factor for atherosclerosis that was not measured in the IRS, they can also be taken to indicate direct effects of impaired insulin action at the level of endothelial and vascular smooth muscle cells. And this is where I get back into the glycocalyx dysfunction. If you look at the papers I put in my resources paper on that, it pretty clearly outlines that if you want to fuck your glycocalyx up, eat a lot of glucose, eat a lot of sugar, eat a lot of carbohydrates. That will fuck up your endothelium and allow more LDL to get in there and create those plaques. And again, I come back to saying because carnivores are not insulinogenic or hyperinsulinemia, they have no risk for heart disease.
It right now. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see how this tells me that LDL has no contribution at all.
I've never disagreed that it doesn't have a contribution, but it has contribution in context.
Not contribute. That isn't. It isn't the initial cause of endothelial damage.
It says pretty
Dysfunction,
clearly
sorry.
that the dysfunction in the arterial walls and the epithelial layers
It mentioned
caused
it
by
mentioned
insulin is the principal cause. That's
well,
exactly
no,
what I
wait,
just said.
where does it say it's the only? Wait, hold on. Let me see that again. Let me read that again. Where does it say that? Direct relationship between insulin resistance as measured by frequently sampled. No, this just says that it's a part of it, right? It doesn't say. This doesn't say.
again-
This doesn't say that.
And this is where I link the statistical analysis, where they looked at the large data sets and determined the risk ratios with multivariate analysis. And it showed pretty unequivocally that total cholesterol is a 1x risk, LDL is a 1x risk, which is non-significant, which is not associated, which is not a good marker to determine if you're at risk for heart disease. But having a lot of insulin is sure as fuck a probably the most important marker that we have for determining heart disease. And this is where we get back into what causes dysfunction in the epithelial. It's not just LDL.
Yeah, and I'm not-
native LDL is a very important part of your body that transports energy across, especially if you're in a ketogenic diet. You need lots of LDL to transport energy. And if you've looked at Dave Feldman's work, he's outlined that pretty well, and he's found a pretty interesting like cross correlation where he's had hundreds of people who have submitted blood work to him while trying like variations in diet and high carbohydrate, high fat, moderate of each to kind of see how it affects each of them. And he found that if people eat 3,500 calories a day, at least 1,000 more calories of saturated fat above their basal metabolic rate, they end up having really, really low triglycerides, HDL or high HDL, low LDL, and low cholesterol. So it's not just eating those foods is going to cause high LDL. Eating animal foods is not just going to cause high LDL and fuck your arteries. It's a combination of things. It's a lot of things in context. And it seems like every time I bring in a context, it's dismissed.
It's not that it's dismissed. Well, no, because I keep telling you that LDL is the initial cause of, or probably the initial cause of atherosclerosis, and then you reference stuff where we're looking at predictive measures for people who already have some sort of plaque in their arteries already, and they're assessing the cardiovascular events. Right, that's what most of them have been showing me, and then we keep going back to what the initial cause is, and then we find that even in that one study that you showed me, that it doesn't seem to say that it doesn't seem to be the case that the insulin is the initial cause.
That's really reductionist. I don't know how else I can explain it, honestly. I just linked 2 other papers if you're curious about the glycocalyx function and what causes dysfunction in it. And there are several papers. There's one from like the 90s that I can't find the name of it, but essentially outlines that dysfunction in the glycocalyx is the first step in atherosclerosis. It is the first singular step. LDL is just, it's like your house is burning down and LDL is a fireman trying to put the fire out, and you come in and blame the fireman for the fire.
Wait, hold on. I accidentally exit out shit. Sorry. Go ahead.
So yeah, my analogy was that it's like if your house is burning down and the firemen are the LDL.
Yeah,
they show up trying to put the fire out.
I know you're talking about.
Fire.
You're talking about the first paper
first
you linked
step.
in your paper, right? Or in your resources, it was like the first paper. It has that like picture of the firefighters extinguishing the fire in some sort of artery, right? I know you're referencing.
I don't know if I said that specifically, but I.
That's literally the reference that I thought I pictured. That's because that's in one of the papers that you referenced.
Yeah, it might be one of them, but still, I mean, the principal point. It's just I wholeheartedly disagree that LDL is a principal root cause. Like it's the one be all.
And then I
like no lipidologist would agree with this. If you talk to any person that investigates this for a living, not a single one of them would go, "Yeah, just native LDL by itself causes fundamental damage to epithelial layer and causes heart disease." Not a single lipidologist would say that to you.
Well, okay, I'm not sure why that's that. I mean, I could just say the same thing because I've talked to a few doctors who say that it is the case.
Okay, which doctors?
Doctors that I've talked to personally, someone in my family has that, and I've talked to them about it. They have an issue, and I've talked to them about it, and I've talked to another doctor on Discord about this specific topic.
Right, and this is where I referenced some of the kind of foremost lipidologist researchers, and their names are in the presentation I sent you. If you want to check them out, they all pretty much wholeheartedly agree that LDL is a terrible biomarker for determining heart disease. They straight up say, like Thomas Dayspring, if you want to check him out, he's probably one of the most well-respected lipidologists in the United States. said that through the NHANES data, a majority of myocardial infarctions are explained by insulin resistance. But the real message is unless LDL-C is below 200 milligrams per liter, it's a terrible biomarker. So you could have extremely high levels of LDL and it's still a terrible biomarker. And you can look at Bruce Brownage, you can look at Doug Boyd, Matthew Budoff, like all these people are in wholehearted agreement that LDL is not a good biomarker for determining heart disease risk. It's just not. And if you want to know the real way to determine risk, look at insulin.
I'd like to hear them say that actually, because I feel like it's more in a different setting, not a general setting of a healthy population. I feel like it makes more sense, and I've seen this to be the case for all elderly populations or people who already have some sort of cardio heart disease who already had a heart attack already, or they have metabolic syndrome.
Well, have you seen any of the data on what statins do for lowering your LDL? Have you seen what the actual number, how much it actually extends your lifespan? Have you read any?
I'm not looking at that. I don't think that statins are used to. From what I understand, statins are used to prevent the event of another heart attack, right?
Yeah, they just lower lipids. That's what they do.
Well, no, they do. Well, actually, that's not true. There are tons of different types of statins that do tons of different things.
Sure, lower
one
LDL,
is
cholesterol,
it does.
HDL.
It lowers LDL cholesterol. Another way it has an anti-inflammatory effect. Another way it increases the bioavailability of endothelial nitric oxide. They do a ton of things.
Perhaps, but have you looked at the actual statistics on how much they actually improve lifespan? How much they increase your lifespan? It's really interesting.
I've looked at a few meta-analyses to see the efficacy of statins, and it seems to be the case that they are pretty promising, and they do work.
Not really. There's a multivariate. I can't remember the name of it. It was a meta-analysis that looked at the benefits of statins and all-cause mortality, and they actually increased all-cause mortality. But in terms of heart disease, in terms of having a heart attack, the maximum that a statin could extend your life if you were at risk of an infarction or some sort of heart attack was by 5 or 6 days. It was not significant at all.
I feel like that some of that might have been taken out of context. I don't feel like that it's just a blanket statement that they aren't very effective in that way. I feel like maybe in populations of people who already have had a few heart attacks already, maybe that might be the case, but I don't feel like that's the case for most people. For most people that are taking them.
I mean, they do though. If you look at the JAMA study, they found pretty large correlations that even though they might lightly decrease your risk of having a heart attack by lowering the amount of LDL in your blood, which I'm not disagreeing with in the sense that if you are already insulin resistant and your glycocalyx is all fucked up and you have lower levels of LDL, less LDL is going to make it into the endothelium to form a plaque. I'm not disagreeing with that. But again, you got to come back to what is causing that dysfunction in the first place that allows LDL to transport between the layers so easily. That's where we get back to insulin resistance.
Sorry. I understand again that it's multifactorial, but sorry, what was your point again? I'm sorry. I was sort of reading something.
Oh, I don't even know at this point. I was just saying that the fact that statins only lower your LDL in your blood, I wasn't disagreeing that, yes, if you have lower levels of LDL in your blood and you have fundamental dysfunction in your glycocalyx where you're allowing more LDL across, if you have less of it in your blood, that's obviously going to be beneficial. I don't disagree with that, but you have to look at the fundamental root causes and the larger picture as to what's causing the dysfunction in the first place. What is the primary driver of that?
Right, and I mean, again, they don't only do that. They have different different types of statins have different type of mechanisms, and what we're looking at is the efficacy of them, and they seem to be working, or in most cases, they seem to work.
They don't
actually
though.
have.
That's why I was talking about what actual benefit they have. It's very minimal. Like the
Well,
first
even I mean,
like Vorstatin or Sorvastatin or whatever the first statin that ever came out was, like it increased your lifespan. Like they found that it barely increased your lifespan, like between 5 and 7 days, I think.
right, and then
It's
look
not
at the people.
beneficial in the whole context.
I don't. Okay. Look, I haven't seen that. But I have a meta-analysis on hand. From the paper that I originally sent you on LDL, the European Heart Study. I have it right here. A meta-analysis of the efficacy of statins.
Right, and I linked other papers that looked at multiple studies on statins and found they increase your all-cause mortality. So even if it lowers your risk of a heart attack, you have a higher risk of cancer, Alzheimer's, and many other inflammatory autoimmune conditions that can kill you.
Wait, but okay, so I'm not. Yeah, so that's sort of a different topic, isn't it? Its main purpose is to reduce the event of dying from a heart attack, right?
Right, and I said that any of the studies on statins, and if you look at the actual numbers in which they increase your length of life, it's nothing. It's like 5 or 6 days. So if you're
I
in the
don't know that.
hospital, you just had a
I
heart
don't
attack,
know
yeah,
that
you
to be
get
the
that, you might
case.
live a little bit longer. I linked 2 studies to talk about it.
Okay, I'll look at. Which one did you want me to look at specifically? Is it this one?
Couple. Let me get the exact comment. Here's one about the increase in lifespan. I think it says it's like 5 or 7 days. Let me get the excerpt.
The first one that you sent me on statins, it says this literature-based meta-analysis did not find evidence for the benefits of statin therapy on all-cause mortality in a high-risk primary prevention setup. Right. So when I say that they worked, again, they work in the sense that they reduce the risk of heart attack events, right?
Yes, and that's what I was saying. I don't disagree that if you're, so we always get back to the same thing. I have agreed with you like several times now, saying if you have dysfunction in the little layer that discerns how much LDL actually gets in, and you have less LDL in the blood, yeah, it's going to be beneficial. But the sum total of having less LDL, like there's a bunch of studies on having low LDL and cancer, low LDL and not living as long. Like again, you got to look at it in the broader context and what the implications for are lowering some important metric called LDL.
Right. So what populations are you looking at that didn't have like are these populations of people that already have some sort of metabolic syndrome that have low LDL? So are you counting for their medications? Are you are you looking at a healthy population of people that already have low LDL? Because from what I've seen, the people who have low amounts of LDL, the populations that eat primarily lower amounts of saturated fat or dietary cholesterol, seem to have longer lifespans and better health outcomes. So, what population people are you looking at? Because that was some sort of thing that Ufi Ravenskopf seemed to do a lot in his papers, where he'd find an association between low amounts of LDL and a higher increase of all-cause mortality. But what he didn't note as well is, if you actually look at the papers, the populations that were observed, the majority of them were, I believe the majority of them were mostly people that already, or no, oh, that's what it was. They didn't account for a lot of things. They didn't account for types of medication used. They didn't account for BMI, for example.
Okay, but that wasn't the point.
How is that not the point? You're looking at populations. You're looking at people. You're saying that low amounts of LDL is bad, right? And then I say,
Yes.
okay, well, the papers that you're looking at didn't account for these other things that could be affecting that action, right? Of having lower LDL.
Let me link. Because again, I mean, we can just continually come back to my principal point. I thought I explained it pretty clearly. I'm not disagreeing that if you are predisposed to heart disease and you take some sort of drug that lowers your LDL, it's going to have a short-term beneficial impact on your risk factors. I mean, I don't disagree with that. But what the point was is, what's the value in lowering LDL if it increases all your other cause? If you increase your risk of cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and 1,000 other things, like what's the value in it? Why is just lowering LDL? Why doesn't that, if it's the principal cause, if it is the fundamental cause of heart disease, and you lower it with a statin, why do we not see much better metrics? Why do we not see much better outcomes for people taking those?
Okay, so like it's not like we only, okay, so this is, again, this goes back to the same problem of the people that are using the statins, right? Like these are people that are like the statin, from what I've seen, is used for people who are almost on their like last legs. Like this is the last step that we can take. A serious situation requires a serious form of action, right? So you can reduce your LDL through dietary through your diet, right? And then there's also different types of drugs that can lower LDL that aren't necessarily statins, like what are they called, bile acids or something like that. Hold on, the paper actually talked about it that I sent you.
Yeah, you need cholesterol to make those bile acids from your liver.
Yeah, and then I think by taking bile acids, they stop the circulation of cholesterol in the body or something like that. I forgot exactly what the mechanism was, but there are other ways to do it, and it seemed to be the case that along with statins, seem to help with cardiovascular disease events. So again, that's kind of besides the point. I'm trying to get to the point that 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 the populations that you're looking at are already people that are kind of like on their last limbs. So a small reduction in their and like keeping them from dying is going to be pretty important for them, right? Wouldn't you say? Like maybe it is the case that some of these statins aren't like completely side effect proof, right? So I guess it's up to them to make the decision whether they want to die from a heart attack or they want to die from something else.
Sure. And I agreed with you on that. If you have fundamental dysfunction, you lower LDL, you live a little bit longer, at least from a heart attack. But the long-term outcomes, in terms of how long you're going to live, like it's very, very small. Like it's a week, give or take. If you look at the large scale statistical analysis of how much of an impact statins have, you can lower LDL into the shitter and get it at like 15 nanograms per liter. And even though your risk of heart disease is going to be much lower, you're going to have a much higher risk of many other diseases, regardless of your current health outcome or your current health state.
And you think that's because of the effect on that statins have, or what?
No, dude, I kind of just outlined it. I said, yeah, if you have dysfunction in your glycocalyx, the little epithelial layer that determines how much LDL is passing below that little epithelial layer to make plaques. If you lower the total serum amount of LDL and you have that dysfunction, it's going to have a mildly better effect. You still have the dysfunction there. The statins do not fix the fundamental root cause of the problem. They just put a Band-Aid on it and lower the amount of LDL in your blood to then subsequently get across that layer. That's all I was saying.
Okay.
But if you want to talk about we can get more specifically into like the various types of LDL. I know you're relatively familiar with oxidized LDL, glycated LDL, large, small, dense. Like, do you have any opinions on which ones are more specifically the cause, or do you think native LDL is contributing to that too?
Oh, well, not really. I don't think that's really an important thing that I want to touch on necessarily. Because I'm still
it's an important mechanism. Like the type of LDL is very important.
Right. So hold on. So let me get it straight. You don't deny. Okay. So do you deny, or I don't remember if you said this or not. Do you deny that native LDL has some sort of mechanism for high amounts of native LDL having some sort of effect on the endothelial wall at all? You don't deny
Yeah,
that.
I do
You're
not
just
think
saying
that
that
native LDL, which
this
is a healthy cholesterol protein, which is responsible for energy transport and repair, I do not think it innately has an inflammatory and fundamental damaging response to your arteries.
okay.
I do
Let's
think
just stick on.
certain types of
Okay,
LDL,
let's.
oxidized, the small dense LDL, those certainly do. They're much easier traversed across that layer,
Okay.
but not native
Right.
LDL. It's a perfect size
Right.
not to go in.
Well, both of them
That's been shown.
actually have an effect. Can have an effect on the endothelial dysfunction. But anyway, did you read the paper that I sent you on native LDL?
Did you?
Because
This was when you pinged me.
yeah, this is yeah. I'll link it again. I highlighted the specific point that I
You
wanted
linked
to
me
talk
one on
about.
oxidized LDL.
It's in the VC link.
There's not a single word native in here. There's no discussion of native LDL.
Yeah, elevated levels of native LDL decrease the bioavailability of endothelium-derived nitric oxide and downregulate endothelial nitric oxide, which is endothelial nitric oxide. Elevated LDL reduces nitric oxide production in part by increasing the interaction between that and that.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is where I come back to, you got to think about it in the context. If we were outside getting sunlight, native LDL, if you're not getting sunlight, perhaps native LDL could have a contribution to it because it's
That just
fundamental dysfunction.
right, but I mean that's you're kind of just assuming that, right? Do you have an like a human experiment to suggest that someone with high amounts of native LDL wouldn't experience this mechanism?
Perhaps I'll have to do some digging, but
Okay.
again, if you isolate these things down to singular, if you look at a single tree in the forest and you say, well, just native LDL decreases bioavailability of nitric oxide and downrates the endothelial
That's just
ENOS.
one. Yeah, that's just one mechanism of it. Yeah.
Yes, sure, but that one mechanism is completely nullified if you just go outside and get sunlight.
And that just that. Well, I'm just gonna ask you for that, so I don't know.
Oh,
You
here,
know.
I'll link you a study
Yeah.
on how much of a benefit sunlight has on cardiovascular disease or
Well,
heat shock, sweating,
well,
like that as well.
no. Let's just talk about the initial part of endothelial dysfunction.
Right, and I'm not disagreeing that if you have high levels of native LDL and you don't go outside and you have a bunch of other risk factors that destroy your epithelial layer, yeah, you're gonna have a dysfunction in your endothelial. Like this is again, like
You're
we
saying
can't
that
be so
this is
reductionist down to this single point and make that like this is your principal point. Like you have this one paper to say that LDL, because of its effect on nitric oxide in your system, it just innately fucks you up and causes heart disease. This is like your principal point. And I'm providing a bigger picture.
Well,
if you look at it in evolutionary context as to how we used to live and what we used to eat, which was fuck tons of meat, by the way, getting sunlight, eating lots of meat, having enough magnesium, getting enough vitamin K2, which helps transport that and helps regulate LDL2, by the way, having excess carbohydrates, which cause glycocalyx dysfunction, having suboptimal omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, which also causes dysfunction in that. It's multivariable. You can't just pinpoint this one study saying that LDL screws with nitric oxide and downregulates the endothelial to saying that, okay, all LDL causes heart disease, even native LDL.
No. So
It's
it's
nonsense.
so hold on. So the only reason I even got into this was because you questioned whether or not native LDL has any sort of impact on the endothelial at all. So I showed you a paper that it's not just native LDL. It's specifically elevated native LDL, right?
Okay,
And
define
then
elevated.
this huh?
Define elevated. Is this above 200 nanograms per milliliter? Is this like the typical? Is this what doctors would consider elevated based on all
I
that
think
sweet epidemiology?
Well, it's not just epidemiology. They have randomized controlled trials to show you that certain things like saturated fat and dietary cholesterol seem to have an impact on your serum cholesterol. And in the original papers that I sent you, one of them was a big review of prospective cohort studies and randomized control trials showing that saturated fats specifically increased your serum cholesterol scores, or the people in the studies altogether. They had an increase in serum cholesterol, and specifically LDL as well.
The NHS's response to that, like they had a pretty clear-cut response and a study on it showing that saturated fats and cholesterol, the link to heart disease, is unproven. Again, implying that there is much more causal mechanisms like insulin resistance in the determining factor whether or not you're going to have heart disease.
I didn't see that paper, no, but the main point. Okay,
There you go.
let's see. I think you sent me this before.
Yep, and it pretty well outlines. There's a nice little picture in the middle there where it looks at coronary artery plaque. There's firemen. This is the exact same thing that you were mentioning
No,
before.
this isn't a response to that.
No, I'm saying the timing of it. This is my response to that. If you just said that
Oh, I
saturated
understand.
fats and cholesterol cause heart disease, I'm linking a resource that says the exact opposite.
Right, and then I did. Okay, so I remember reading this before, but let's see. Where specifically can I look at their ref? Okay, just point out the specific, because this isn't specifically on. Oh wait, saturated fat does not clog arteries. No.
Here, I'll read the
Look
excerpt.
through it.
So
No, you don't
here's
have
a
to.
little
I'm just
excerpt
looking.
on it.
No,
It's
I'm just
beautiful.
looking
It's
for.
really well
No,
written.
it's cool. I'm looking specifically for dietary saturated fat or dietary cholesterol not having an impact on serum cholesterol. That's what I'm looking for specifically, right? Because that's what that's what I referenced.
Yeah, and again, it depends if those studies are
This isn't-
isocaloric too. I do know that like I said, Dave Feldman's done a bunch of research on this with hundreds of people and himself taking his blood work every day, always like sticking to a diet religiously and manipulating his blood lipid levels. He knows, and pretty much everyone else does, that if you're combining fats with carbs, yes, then there's a problem with saturated fats. But if you're just eating saturated fats and meat, if you're eating a ketogenic diet, there's absolutely no fucking risk. It does not exist.
Well, no. Well, I mean, you could.
This is why I advocate for a ketogenic diet, because it treats all the fundamental root causes of heart disease and many other diseases, including cancer, if you look at the metabolic theory of that.
Right, and I would just ask, like, okay, how you're going to presuppose that that these interventions introduce carbohydrates at the same time, right?
Saying if you can find me an isocaloric study with people on a ketogenic diet looking at their arterial calcification and all the other markers that determine heart disease.
No.
You can find me a study on that. I'll read it, but
we weren't talking about calcification at all. We were talking about specifically whether or not these things. Again?
It relates to it though. That's the thing. Is it's relationary.
No, that's more of a different topic, right? What we're talking about specifically was whether or not these things increase increase the lipids and as being saturated fat or dietary cholesterol, and
right. And this is where I
so
brought up the carbohydrates. If you look at people's blood markers when they go on a ketogenic diet, their triglycerides go super low.
And their LDL goes super high, right?
Yeah, native LDL. It's not oxidized. It's clean, nice repair LDL. It does what it's supposed to, transport energy. It's just an energy transport system. Like it's like saying that this little lipoprotein is like the whole causal mechanism of heart disease is just.
So
it's very silly and just reductionist and simplistic and bringing it back to a singular point.
Because you're
multifactorial in the contest of your lifestyle and what you eat.
I understand that it's multifactorial, and then you're talking about it, but that's in a different context. Okay, look. So to focus on your first point, let's just focus on the point that you said that in these trials where you see an increase in serum cholesterol, you say it's because of carbohydrates. How do you know that these trials are all done on only on introducing carbohydrates and saturated fat?
I mean, you have to give me one specifically, but I do know that there's been a lot of talk. Like Dave Feldman's talked about this, so has Ivor Cummins and many other cholesterol researchers, including some of the more prominent lipidologists, they've outlined pretty clearly that most of the studies on the effects of saturated fat and cholesterol intake dietarily on your blood serum lipid levels, the control diets that they used was an even mix. It was most of it was like the standard USDA guidelines where you are combining fats and carbohydrates. They did not test this on people on a ketogenic diet, which is like, it's a completely different metabolic state. Like ketones
What about-
regulate so many epigenetics and lipid markers.
Okay, but what about dietary intervention studies where they literally have someone just eat food and then they test their blood their lipid profile?
Yeah, and food has a profound effect on your lipid profile. If you eat a bunch of white
Right.
bread, your LDL is going to go in the shitter. Like, that's been well shown. Like, eating whole grains lowers your LDL, and that's why people think they're good for you. On the presupposition that lowering your LDL is a good thing. That eating grains to lower your LDL is beneficial for you.
Right.
It's not.
Well, okay, that's a totally different story, because I have the same complaint about where I see a lot of, this is completely off topic, but I see ketogenic trials where they don't even account for like, or no, was it ketogenic? I think it's, yeah, they'll compare ketogenic dieters to people who are on a higher carb diet, and they don't even account for the types of carbohydrates that the other participants are eating. And I think it's super important. But anyway, let's get back on the topic. So I posted a dietary intervention of metabolic ward studies. It's a meta-analysis, and they show that dietary cholesterol and saturated fat seem to increase your serum cholesterol and even your LDL specifically in a dose-dependent manner.
Okay. And what else are they eating it with? Can you send me the study where they outline that they didn't eat any carbohydrates with it and they were in a ketogenic metabolism?
Let me look
If
through
not,
it.
it's completely
We'll look at
irrelevant,
the-
because you have to look at the multivariate. Really, if you want to be healthy metabolically, and Denise Minger, she's got a pretty good overview of this, and she's done a critique of the China study and some of the advice to lower saturated fats in there. She's found if you're going to pick two diets to eat, one, you can either do a very low fat diet, which is high in carbohydrate, moderate protein, or you can do a very high fat diet, low in carbohydrate, moderate protein. Each of those will have different benefits. I mean, if you look at the Randall cycle, I know we've talked about that before. Each will have different changes to your lipid function. How much LDL is produced, how much triglycerides are produced. You have to look specifically at those two variations of it to determine any sort of causal factor. And I have a study here from 2002 on a ketogenic diet favorably affecting serum biomarkers for cardiovascular disease and normal weight healthy men. That was pretty clear. It was a 6-week long study that found pretty good correlations. And I linked that whole ketogenic diet study list if you want to comb through that and find many other low carb studies showing beneficial markers for insulin resistance, lower serum triglycerides, having lower cholesterol and variation depending on the population and other genetics. But again, just getting back to the principal point that you can't say that ketogenic diets or that a diet high in animal foods and low in carbohydrates causes heart disease, because that is completely unfounded.
I'd still disagree with you on that, but that's besides
I mean,
the point,
we know what the risk factors are, though. We know that insulin is the primary risk
understand.
factor, and what
I
lowers
don't know
insulin the most? Ketogenic
Yeah,
diets.
but you haven't demonstrated that it's the key factor here, right?
I have like
Demonstrated that it has. No, you haven't. You've
I don't know if I can
demonstrated that
link
it has. You haven't. You've demonstrated that it has a mechanism. That's about it.
so much more than mechanism. It's the mechanism of insulin and how all the downstream effects affect your inflammation levels. The high levels of blood glucose affects your glycocalyx function, which regulates the amount of LDL getting across the epithelial. Like I've probably said this at least 12 times now. I'm sure I'm irritating the fuck out of everyone in this chat. But again, like if you look at the presentation I put together, it's got a really, really good summation of hyperinsulinemic syndrome and the metabolic syndrome that is really the root cause of most of the disease that we deal with today in such a large, broad scale. Like if you know about Thomas Seyfried's work and the metabolic theory for cancer. If you know about Alzheimer's, pretty much most Alzheimer's research call it type 3 diabetes because it's just how negatively insulin impacts your brain. It also negatively affects your cardiovascular system. And this is why I always come back to the evolutionary argument and just cement myself in what were we doing prior to modern agriculture, supermarkets, refrigerators, access to all the food that you want. We were eating a high fat, high meat diet with carbohydrates intermittently when they were available in season. There's causal mechanisms in which emulating the life of your ancestors makes you live longer. Like there's so many variables that go to just basically prove that the more you emulate the life of your ancestors, the more that you emulate the life that we used to live before modern agriculture and supermarkets and our now current excessive carbohydrate intake. We can go to the fucking store and buy 15 candy bars at your checkout aisle. Like these are all the causal factors in heart disease. And if you look at the statistical analysis, like the time frame in which the human diet has changed in America, when we changed our dietary guidelines, started to demonize fat, saying saturated fat was bad, we switched to carbohydrates and all of our diseases went through the fucking roof. Like it's almost too obvious. And the fact that we're even debating this is just mind blowing to me, that you can tether yourself to one single metric of LDL and then find a paper that says saturated fat raises LDL. So consequently that you're going to get heart disease from eating animal foods. It's just not true, especially if you look at the historical context. If you look at other populations and their consumption of saturated fats, it's just not true. It's only in America, really, is the only country that thinks this shit. We're the only one brainwashed and stupid enough to believe that animal foods are causing heart disease and causing cancer and other shit. It's very obvious, and I don't know how you don't see it or how other vegans don't see it.
I just haven't been presented with the case yet. I understand that it has a role, but I'm still not seeing that it's the initial causal role. I'm sorry. You haven't presented that yet.
Have you actually looked at like the population data and what humans were eating and what coincides with our disease risk increasing? Have you actually looked into the timelines, like when this all started? Because
no, I don't think that's. Well, hold
disease.
on. I don't think that's. That's just again, right? That's just one part of the puzzle, right? That doesn't necessarily tell you the causal factor, right? And I think you even acknowledge this when you say trash epidemiological studies. Ironically, you use them anyway. They have limitations, and the limitations of them is they can't show a causal. They can't show any sort of causation, right? So, like that's just one part of the puzzle. And I've seen many metabolic wart studies, like the one I've linked to you, which it seems to be the case that they're using dairy products, meat, oils, eggs, and other things like that to increase cholesterol. Those are some of the things that they use, and that it's a big meta-analysis, but that seems to be what they mostly used.
Oh God, what did I walk into?
Right. So, again, bring back the evolutionary context. Why do you think our heart disease rates were so low prior to the 1960s? What? Do you have any reason as to why?
I know. Call on me, teacher.
We need a mod.
I am a mod, actually. My apologies.
Oh shit. All right, you'll help.
I just don't think that's relevant, right? Because again,
relevant.
Even you acknowledge. No, not necessarily, right? Because in this context, we're talking about the cause, not the implications here, right? And you would acknowledge that epidemiological studies have their limitations. So no, I don't see it as relevant. I see it almost as like
you don't see
we're
how
going off topic.
No, but it is related because you have to look at the broad picture to determine what is actually causing heart disease. What has changed and what caused such a massive spike in the amount of heart disease that we see today, and cancer and Alzheimer's? Like what changed?
No, right, and there's like you just admitted, it's a multifactorial thing, and just looking at the just a sort of like broad spectrum. Okay, this is increasing with higher amounts of meat consumption or something like that, or higher amounts of refined carbs. Like I'm not really interested in that. No.
It's relevant there's because way too high carbohydrate intake drives insulin resistance, which drives heart disease. That has been the principal point of my argument. If you can't put those together, I don't know what to tell you. And again, you look at historical data, you look at what other countries eat and their heart disease risk. It's not saturated fat in animal foods, man. It's just not. It's not well shown in any sort of country data. I mean, even if you look at the blue zones, they ate cheese, dude. Like, they ate tons of dairy and fish. Like, yeah, they eat a lot of plants, but that's not what's preventing their heart disease. They eat a lower carbohydrate diet. And again, if you look at the timeline in which heart disease has started in America and many other countries who have been westernized, the second that we started consuming excessive amount of carbohydrates, all of our disease risk went up. Every fucking one of them, dude. Every single one of them went sky high, and they're still increasing. And we have 2 and 3 people today who are diabetic or pre-diabetic. We have 1 and 2 cancer rates. We have massive amounts of Alzheimer's once you get past 60. All these things are fundamentally driven by hyperinsulinemia from the excessive consumption of carbohydrates in combination with saturated fats. I've given you that if you combine both of those, if you eat carbs and fats together, you are going to royally fuck up your insulin sensitivity and increase your risk for heart disease. I don't disagree with that. But ketogenic diets that we've been eating for millions of years, being in a ketogenic metabolism, getting lots of sunlight, getting adequate magnesium, being grounded to the earth, which is another contested topic, all these things have important regulations in conjunction with eating a lot of animal foods. So I'm sure if you were in your house all day, if you were just sitting in your house eating a really high-fat diet, never getting sunlight, not getting enough vitamin C or magnesium or any other of the important minerals or electrolytes, yeah, I'm sure your heart disease risk is going to go a lot higher, but it's not the principal cause. It's just not. Animal foods are what we've thrived on for millions of years. They forged our entire being. They're what made you who you are today. And to demonize animal foods is
we demonize animal foods based on, again, dietary interventions where we look at we're basing this off the hypothesis of the lipid hypothesis. But anyway, we look at the effects on serum cholesterol. We look at the effects of the associations with certain types of like cancers, certain other types of diseases like diabetes, and from what I've seen it to be the case, it's more in the direction of the animal products, and not necessarily like plant foods at all. So this is why I try to stay away from a lot of associations, because if I'm just going to present to you an association, that just begs the question: what is the actual cause here? And that's something that I thought you would understand, since you seem to have a really poor or a huge critique against epidemiology. So
yeah, that's statistically valid though. 0 to 20% of epidemiology is proved. So nearly 80 to 99.9% of epidemiology performed. When they test it in a random control trial, it's unfounded. Epidemiology is probably the biggest driver for death and disease in the fucking world today. It makes so many broad correlations incorrectly and determines so much of our dietary guidelines. I honestly think that the way our epidemiology has been handled and how news media handles epidemiology has killed fucking millions of people by now.
Awesome.
It is not a good science to look at.
Right. So then why are you looking at it?
It's just not. That's
so then why are you looking at it is my question.
What do you mean? Why am I?
You're looking at an association between disease rates and I'm assuming the amount of carbohydrates eaten, right? So I don't understand why
you're talking about the historical context. Again, this is just common sense. Like, this is just like basic critical thinking skills where you go, hey, let's look at what we were eating prior to the 1960s, before the whole low-fat nonsense started coming out. What were we eating before that? It was a lot of meat, eggs, and dairy. Plain and simple. We were eting a lot of meat, eggs, and dairy, lots of saturated fats, lots of beef tallow, all those high saturated fat foods, and we had extremely low levels of heart disease. How is that not relevant? How is that not correlated with this?
Well, I haven't seen that to be the case. That's totally besides the point. But I'm just saying, I don't understand why you're even you're relying on this type of data that you just admitted you don't have a high opinion of, and doesn't seem to have a good predictive power. So
this isn't epidemiology though. Like, when you're looking at historical context.
That is
epidemiology is where you get people to do surveys and then you look for correlations in that.
Well, no,
epidemiology
that's
in the context of history is, you can call it epidemiology, sure, but it's just more or less common sense.
Well, no, it's not common sense. We're looking at trends here, right? We're looking at trends. So it's an actual experiment, right? It's not a direct human experiment. We're looking at associations. That's what you're doing, and you acknowledge the limitations of that.
Repeat that. So you're saying I'm ignoring the limitations. We've agreed on this.
You acknowledge the limitations of these types of studies where they look at associations, and you just admitted that most of them don't seem to have very good predictive power. So what I'm asking you is why you're relying on them so much.
What are you talking about, me relying on them? I'm not even talking about an epidemiological study right now. I'm talking about basic critical thinking skills where you look at a graph on the rates of our heart disease per person. You look at a graph and see, when did that spike so rapidly? When did our cancer disease rates spike so rapidly?
Right,
what
so
happened at that exact time was a
Right.
massive change in our dietary guidelines to consume more carbohydrates and less saturated fat. And then I bring in my mechanism, which I've been arguing this whole time, is that insulin resistance from excessive carbohydrate intake is the primary driver of all chronic disease. If you are eating a lot of animal foods, but not a lot of carbohydrates, you are not at risk for heart disease. You're not at risk for many other diseases. And again, if you look at Thomas Seyfried's work into the metabolic theory of cancer, he's pretty well outlined that cancer functions on two things, and the cellular fermentation of glucose and glutamine. So if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, you're going to have a higher risk for cancer. And that is well shown in research. There's one that just came out a couple weeks ago showing that consumption of sugary drinks and fruit juices increases your risk of cancer. Why would that be?
Again, well, no, see, this is again, you just literally outlined epidemiology and how people use it to conduct experiments. They look at trends and then they conduct experiments, right?
We have causal mechanisms. We have causal mechanisms. That's the difference.
Oh, right. We have causal mechanisms, and then we have to have a human experiment, right? Validate the mechanism.
Yes.
Awesome.
I'm not disagreeing with that. And I told you the percentage. 0 to 20% of epidemiology is proved in random controlled trials or mechanisms. So I don't think we're disagreeing on this. But
we're disagreeing on the part that you said. Well, we're disagreeing on the part that you think that the observations that you've found for are an explanation on why these diseases have increased. You don't think that that's epidemiology when that's literally what you outlined as epidemiology.
Right, and I put in a pretty clear disclaimer in there saying that epidemiology is a bad science innately to base
so that's why I'm asking you why you're using it.
I'm arguing for this side, dude. I don't know how you're not picking up on this. I said specifically that most epidemiology studies where they try to find correlations with saturated fat intake and heart disease, and then they come back and they try to look for a causal mechanism. And again, if you've seen both sides, there's studies that say there's no causal mechanism in which saturated fats and cholesterol consumption from foods causes heart disease, and you have studies that show that it does. There's studies on saturated fat increasing LDL, and then you have a study that shows that there's a causal mechanism with nitric oxide affecting the endothelial. I'm saying this is really just basic common sense and looking at long-term correlations with when our heart disease risk has gone up, when our cancer risk has gone up, when our whole line of chronic disease has gone up. It correlates at the exact year, like the same year that we started these guidelines. All these risk factors went up when we started consuming more carbohydrates and less animal foods.
But you don't see how that, right? But you don't see how that needs to be like directly like tested, right? Like it could literally be anything. Like there's so many things that could there's so many things that could have affected that, right? Just because it seems to be the case doesn't mean it is.
Okay. Well, do you have any mechanisms for what would cause that? What can you give me an explanation of what changed in the 60s that would be increasing our rates of heart disease, cancer? I've given you my explanation, but you haven't given me your explanation.
Well, I wouldn't even rely on a mechanistic explanation necessarily. I would look at human experiments that we have, since they seem to be they seem to have the greatest predictive power, and I would rely on that, and I have. I showed you
the massive ketogenic diet study list that I've linked about how it cures type 2 diabetes, improves blood lipid markers for cardiovascular disease, lowers insulin resistance, treats Alzheimer's, treats autoimmune disease, and 1,000 other downstream effects of hyperinsulinemia. those have no value. Like there's
I'm not saying.
massive
Wait, what?
amounts of studies in
Wait,
there.
from what I just told you, it would have value if it's a human experiment, right?
Yeah, and they all are.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay.
The
So-
ketogenic diet study list, and again, all those studies correlate with the hypothesis. They all correlate together that all the major diseases that the ketogenic diet is treating all started when we switched our dietary guidelines away from fat and animal foods to high carbohydrate diets.
Okay.
I don't know how that's confusing or why that's triggering.
No. It's because you first started with saying that the first part where we have an increased risk of all these diseases at a certain point, and then you said it's not epidemiology. And I said, well, why are you relying on epidemiology if you don't even like it? And then you said it's not epidemiology, right? That was the beginning. But anyway, the ketogenic diet data that you have. No, it's not semantics. It's literally like an error. It's an error that you're making. It's literally the error you're making.
No, you're cherry picking the phrasing. Really, I said that epidemiology
that's
is
not
a
even
bad
that.
science for determining what type of guidelines we should be following, and that's what all of our dietary guidelines were based on. Was Ansel Keys's epidemiology, man. That's where it all started. I'm saying that principle use of epidemiology has perpetuated so much death and destruction in the world. That's why I'm saying it's a bad science to look at, but it doesn't mean it's not completely invaluable.
Okay.
I think it's a bad science to determine things off of. That's the delineation that you're for some reason cherry picking.
Just to kind of like the Ansel Keys thing. Okay, so just so you know, he did his own intervention study. He did his own experiments on humans and actually validated that. I actually have it on hand if you want to see it. He actually did his own experiments on specific types of fats. And that's where he kind of came to his conclusion.
I mean, do you know the history about his 7 Nation study? Like, do you know how much he cherry picked that and how the original 23, I believe, started 24?
This is I actually have a lot of data for this. I've read up about this because I see a lot of you guys seem to really dislike Ansel Keys.
Yeah, he's
and
a lot of you
guys right, and a lot of you guys kind of rely on Denise Minger's review of the China study, right? I believe, but this is kind of off topic
for
anyway.
A high carb diet. She doesn't advocate for a ketogenic diet all the time.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
she wants people to go between, like, take advantage of, again, the seasonal availability metrics where sometimes throughout the year you can eat a lot of carbohydrates and then you want to stop to get back to being insulin sensitive. But that's besides the point.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to go too into this. It's just the reason why I brought that up is because you rely on her for the review of or the debunking the China study. You rely on her information a lot.
A lot of people have debunked him.
I haven't seen it to be the case, but anyway.
It's not even debunking. Like, it's just straight up outlining how much of a corrupt piece of shit he was. He took a fuck ton of money from the sugar industry and villainized fat, and then profited from the switch.
They didn't just villainize fat. If you look at he has like 3 or 4 or 5 or there are some studies where he literally did metabolic wart studies, and this isn't just like he wasn't just relying solely on epidemiology. Like, this guy was not an idiot. This guy was really he paved the way for a lot of the data that we have now, actually.
You know, he was not well liked.
Constantly,
like, he was so vehemently attacked. I mean, if you look into the politics of how that man got into power and what he did to get on the board of the AHA, and like, he was a corrupt, angry piece of shit. He was not a good person. He had bad intentions initially, and he built his entire career on a fundamental fucked up hypothesis with cherry picked data from the 7 Nation study. He's just a corrupt piece of shit. There's nothing you can do to convince me that he wasn't.
Well, I could probably show you a few things where the reasons why he stated that he didn't feel that these other countries were worth even plotting, and a lot of it had to do with the recording of their mortality rates. It was also I forget which one, but one of them was during a war they had, so he felt it wouldn't be fair to show the data for that because it'd be kind of misleading.
Well, it's pretty clear. The studies that he correlated on his graph, they found that all the studies that had low heart disease risk were the ones that ate a lot of saturated fats. Like France, for example, who consume fuck tons of cheese and have very low heart disease risk. Is that not relevant? Why do you eliminate those data sets from the pool? What was the value in that?
Say that again.
He eliminated most of the countries that consume lots of saturated fats. If you look at the whole graph before he eliminated it to the 7 countries that he used to determine his causal mechanism of saturated fat intake with heart disease, there was like
what year was that,
other
by the way?
studies on there. I don't know, like
What year was? What graph are you
something?
talking about? Are you sure it was 1960s? Because I feel like you referenced this. This is where a lot of people get this wrong. They reference a paper that Denise Minger took out of context, where it was a older study that he had done a while ago. I think this is it. I think I referenced it here. There's a pretty clear trend here that from what I'm seeing, the increase in the calories from fat increase the risk of
But
heart disease.
again, he left out all the other countries that didn't have any correlations with that, like Japan, South Korea, France, like all those countries that consume
And
a lot of pork and saturated fats. He eliminated them for no reason,
right?
Really, or actually for a reason to prove his point that saturated fats cause heart disease because he was trying to make a career out of it. He's so vehemently defending that position.
A lot of the times he eliminated them because he felt that they didn't have that it was unfair to use them because like either the country didn't have good mortality rate statistics, or they had very small populations, or there was a lot of complete lack of dietary data. There's a lot to point out here that the reason why he left a lot of this out.
Corruption. I think that's a principal reason. Just straight corruption and bias and trying to make a career out of himself. And obviously, when you get money from the sugar industry, you got to prove a point that benefits their industry. I mean, he was captured. He was regulatory captured by the sugar industry. He is not a good person to look at, and the fact that you defend him is just unbelievable to me. If you know his political history.
Well, because I'd rather. Well, because I mean, I could attack a few of the keto. I can attack a few of the keto advocates for having publication bias, but I'm not going to do that because I'd rather just look at the actual data and see whether or not it was right or not.
Except
like
if you look at
is one thing.
The people that go on ketogenic diets, like if you knew how profoundly it changed their life and how it, I mean, I'm not going to give my story, but I know pretty much everyone in here that ended up on a ketogenic diet came from a shit diet high in plant foods and carbohydrates, and found great results in a ketogenic diet.
But I could just do the same thing, right? Again, I could say like I have no problem with it. I know many other people that have no problem with it, and a lot of people that I know that are on it have really good blood markers. The blood work is fantastic. So this is kind of besides the point.
No, it's relevant because I mean I got blood work when I was a vegan, vegetarian, and keto afterwards, and the only thing that was really in the shitter throughout all of that is I had low testosterone. I had high LDL pretty much consistently throughout the whole thing, even when I was vegan, vegetarian. Like how you feel is probably the largest determinant factor in what you should eat. And when you're
I don't know
when
about
you're vegan or plant-based and you're so wrapped into an ideology that you're not willing to test out another way of eating purely because of ethical reasons, I don't know. We've all been through these diets. Like we've all tried pretty much every diet there is in an attempt to fix our issues, and we all end up on the carnivore diet for some reason. I find that very interesting. Or ketogenic diet. But in any context, if you want to talk about which diets have been around for longer, like the low-fat diet has only existed for 60 years since Ansel Keys. Prior to that, we were in a ketogenic metabolism for a majority of our life. We ate lots of saturated fats. We had seasonal availability of carbohydrates, which allowed us to get fat for the winter, which protected us. So there's value in these mechanisms. There's value in the mechanism of insulin and putting on fat. But again, which diet has been around for longer? The ketogenic diet has been around for 2.5 million years of human evolution, and the high carbohydrate diet or the vegan diet has been around for 60 to 40 years of our evolution. And considering our disease rates, I'm going to stick with the evolutionary diet. And also, I just linked a study on the reevaluation of the traditional diet heart hypothesis from the Minnesota coronary experiment that Ansel Keys did. And the overview of it is pretty damning. He just straight up he buried the study because he didn't want people to see it because it completely went against everything that he tried to prove. Intervention group had, let's see, so 9,400 participants. He was the one that led the study for the diet heart hypothesis. Subjects were in mental health institutions or nursing homes, which helped them ensure dietary guidelines were followed to a T for 56 months. The control group ate a diet high in saturated fats and animal fats. The intervention group at serum cholesterol lowering diet replaced saturated fat with vegetable oils from corn oil and corn polyunsaturated margarine. The intervention diet group had a 14% reduction in cholesterol, but it didn't have a reduce in death rate. There was a 22% higher risk of death for each 30 milligrams per deciliter reduction in cholesterol. So why did the death rates increase? It was because vegetable oils reduce LDL, increasing their potential for oxidation. Till about 100 years ago, we would consume about 2 to 3% of our calories from linoleic acid. When this diet came out, that increased to 8%, which had pretty devastating consequences. And the linoleic acid increase of oxidized linoleic acid derivatives were implicated in the pathogenesis of a number of diseases, including heart disease. So one of his principal studies where he tried to prove that less saturated fat and higher consumption of polyunsaturated fat blew up in his face and did the exact opposite and killed more people in the end. But he ended up burying it, and that wasn't talked about or used as dietary guideline metrics. But I'm sure you'll still defend him.
Well, I'm just reading over. Sorry, you'll link a study, and then I'd like to go over it a little bit before even saying anything. So give me a moment, I suppose. This looks so it's not so. This looks at linoleic acid, right? And vegetable oil, right?
Yeah,
Lowering
which is what they told us all to
effectively
eat.
lowers, right? So a lot of what?
This is what the government told us all to eat after
Oh,
Ansel
gotcha.
Keys'
I see what you're
studies.
trying to say. Okay. Effectively lowers serum cholesterol, but does not support the hypothesis that translates to a lower risk of death from coronary heart disease. Lower risk of death. These were people that were sick already, right? This is an intervention trial for people that are in a hospital.
No, mental health hospital. They were healthy, but they had mental illness. But healthy in the context of, I mean, regardless, outcomes of it are pretty damning. Josh, what the fuck are you talking about? Vegan diet, not a vegan diet, vegetarian diets have been. If you want to talk about vegetarian diets, that's a whole different ballgame. If you look at India, they eat a lot of dairy. They worship cows and drink their milk. They eat eggs. They eat other animal meat. They don't just eat plants. So I'm not disagreeing that plant heavy diets haven't been recommended for a long period of time in many religions across the world. But a plant only diet has only existed for about since 1944, 1950. Has not been around for a long time, just eating nothing but plants. So Josh, you're the one gish galloping, being disingenuous. You find whatever link you want, man. Like, it wasn't veganism. It's very different. Veganism is new. Vegetarianism is very old. That's been something that many cultures have done through for a long period of time. I know what gish galloping is. It means I'm presenting too many points at once to try and prove my point. Yeah, it's not my fault you guys can't conceptualize more than fucking 2 things at a time.
So the main point here from this data is to suggest that what Ansel Keys had suggested. Sorry, say it again. What was the main point from here?
The outcome of the
trial, yeah.
Yeah, the Minnesota. Okay, to boilerplate it. If you look at the actual statistics, they were looking at what the change in fat consumption did to cholesterol and LDL and other cholesterol metrics. They had
So replacing saturated fat with linoleic acid seemed to lower the amount of serum cholesterol.
Yes, but it killed them. It increased 22% higher risk of death from making that change. They had higher mortality risk from switching to higher linoleic acid.
Right. Okay. So, and then the point here being was that Ansel Keys had recommended recommended eating plant-based oils or something.
He buried
or
this
what was
too.
the point of this?
He didn't publish this. This whole study he buried. He didn't talk about. He didn't mention it. He didn't bring it up anywhere. He buried this study that he ran himself because it completely contradicted everything he was trying to tell people to do, which was replace saturated fat intake with the vegetable oils like corn oil and margarine and other high linoleic acid vegetable oils. And it killed people. 22% more people died from it. They had a massive, and it was corollary too. So it wasn't just on a metric. It went from 22% higher risk of death for each 30 milligram per deciliter reduction in cholesterol. So if you lowered it enough, people died much more often, which again correlates with having high levels of serum cholesterol being associated with longevity.
Where did he say to eat more plant-based oils or margarine?
It's right in the outline. I mean, you can pull this study up too in SciHub, like the outline, the intervention group. So what he essentially did is the control group ate a diet high in saturated fats and animal fats. Then the intervention group had a serum cholesterol lowering diet that replaced saturated fat with vegetable oils from corn oil and corn polyunsaturated margarine. So he compared the two groups, and the group that died more often, statistically much higher risk of death, was a group that ate more vegetable oils. It's pretty clear cut.
I'm just no, yeah. I don't even think I disagree with eating that replacing saturated fat with saturated fat would have a negative effect. But I'm just wondering where that statement is coming from.
No,
I'm looking
it was
through
more
it.
or less trying to prove a point that he's a corrupt piece of shit that should not be trusted in any context. His research should be burned. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, but where in this where in this paper did it say that he was recommending this? Or I understand that he was a co principal investigator on this, but I'm not sure what your point was here, I guess.
So they were trying to prove the diet heart hypothesis. What Ansel Keys, this is something you've told me and explained to me just a few minutes ago, that his principal point was reducing saturated fat intake in the human diet, right? Like that was his main theory.
Hold on. I actually have a direct quote from him what he was trying to do in his China study. He's published papers of people who have made responses to him, and he's responded to these misinterpretations of him and what his China study was for. I'm trying to find it.
You have to link it to me.
Yeah,
just-
yeah.
I mean, it's just, again, like, if you just look at the health outcomes after the launch of the dietary guidelines in 1980, it's just blatantly obvious that we went in the wrong direction and that we've wrongfully villainized animal foods. That's just, I guess that's the principal point we're trying to make here.
I don't know. So he's an advocate for the Mediterranean diet.
Yeah, which I think could be a healthy
Yeah.
diet. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah,
but
so-
the Mediterranean diet can include eggs and fish and high omega-3 foods
so
and
his-
olive oil,
so his
which is
main-
a good food to eat.
Right. So his main point here is the good Mediterranean diet is low. What he considers the good Mediterranean diet is low in saturated fat and cholesterol.
Right. But you're still eating some animal foods.
Right.
That it
I don't think
does
I don't
not
think
disclose
I don't think
animal
he's
foods.
ever. I don't think he's ever made a statement saying that he says completely eliminates completely eliminate animal products or completely eliminate saturated fat. I don't think he's ever said that.
What are you talking about? His entire spiel was saturated fats cause heart disease in any amount. There was a talk with him saying that openly. Like, if you look at the meeting with him at the AHA Association with everyone around, I can't, like, James McGovern or the McGovern report where they had everyone together talking about the dietary recommendations. He outright said that any sort of saturated fat intake into your diet increases risk of heart attacks. That was his principal point that he tried to prove in research and failed royally at in the Minnesota
I don't
study.
think he. Well, I don't think so. Here, I'll link this here. And there was a follow-up to his Minnesota study. Yeah.
So can we just come to a summation here and agree? Like, obviously there is a lot of research for both of our perspectives. I mean, at this point, you could find a study that says cholesterol causes heart disease. It doesn't cause heart disease. You can find a study for the opposite of saturated fats for literally everything. So
I don't know.
this is where I try to, again, default to emulating the life of your ancestors. Do you think there's no value in that at all? Like,
I think that might have some value, but I don't think it's relevant to humans, but current humans right now. But that's kind of like irrelevant. So did you read the saturated fats in health the CACN report? It was some like dietary guidelines from Europe. Yeah, it's in VC link. If you, I actually highlighted them specifically here. Give me a moment.
Yeah, just link it again because there's a couple. So there's one from the BMJ, dietary
That wasn't
lipids and
me.
blood cholesterol.
That wasn't me. That was
No, I'm in VC,
cognitive
VC
dissonance.
link.
Oh, in VC. Oh yeah, I've been posting them in VC links.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Which one of this list?
Shit, did that not work? Oh no, it is. Awesome.
Oh,
yeah,
the PDF?
So this is where, like, I'd say, like, I don't think it is the case that maybe it is the case that there are a lot of studies that say different things, but I think a lot of meta-analysis that we have currently that I think are pretty good would suggest that saturated fats and dietary cholesterol seem to increase serum cholesterol, and they seem to be highly associated with coronary heart disease events.
Okay. And then I can link mine that says the exact opposite, and we get nowhere.
Oh, this is like a pool. This is a big pool of multiple different studies. The syntax that they used was massive.
Actually, I just found an interesting part here. Hang on. Talks about insulin in this paper.
Yeah. Oh, but just to acknowledge the limitations. I noted this here. Lack of information on type of carbohydrates substituted for saturated fats. There was a lack of sufficient data for like using medications and stuff like that. That often happened in the studies that they looked at.
Hang on, I'm reading the parts about insulin resistance, and they seem to be pretty back and forth with what the primary cause is. Give me a second. Yep, here's a good summary. In summary, insufficient evidence was available from RCTs on saturated fat intake and insulin resistance to reach any conclusion. We found systematic reviews of RCTs that insulin resistance was not improved with saturated fat decrease or increase. I mean, and that is something that we know mechanistically. If you want to talk about the two foods that increase insulin, it's carbohydrates and protein. If you eat a lot of protein, you can increase your insulin. I mean, if you want to think of it in terms of a scale, at the very top, it's carbohydrates, protein second. Saturated fats have absolutely no impact on insulin, which again kind of ties into my whole position.
I mean, I wouldn't agree with that. I just think that the evidence
What this
for
says,
it.
the thing you linked me
Yeah,
says this
yeah,
specifically.
right. Yeah, yeah, and they noted the limitations of this well, and specifically for your case here, they didn't specify the types of carbohydrates, right, in replacement of saturated fats.
No,
Would you
not
agree that that might
specifically.
be a
And
limitation?
yeah, there are
Yeah,
variations in insulin responses to varying types of carbs, but any carbohydrate is going to raise your insulin higher than it would with protein and fat. That's unequivocal. Like you're if you want to increase your insulin, you eat carbohydrates and protein. And that's why bodybuilders eat fuck tons of carbs and protein to put on muscle, because it increases IGF-1, which is insulin growth factor. I mean,
well,
I'm not sure what type. I mean, you're just linking me a big PDF that's put together by a government organization that's probably
yeah.
regulatory captured by a bunch of agricultural companies that have vested interest in people eating their seed oils. But there's plenty of parts in here that completely contradict the whole hypothesis.
Well, not at all. If the original reason I posted this was for showing that saturated fats increases serum cholesterol scores and also increases LDL. That's the reason why I linked it.
Okay.
Despite
We've already
not
kind
even
of agree. I mean, I'm never going to come on your side with agreeing that LDL is a causal factor in heart disease. I'm just the singular sole factor. And if you just control F insulin, there's 250 different studies in this list that talk about insulin and variations. So substituting saturated fats with carbohydrates and insulin resistance, they found increases in insulin resistance.
yeah, and then
There's
often that I don't know if
proving my
you've heard,
point.
I don't know if you've looked at them, but I've looked at them often, and a lot of the studies, and this is why they note this here in this snapshot that I linked to. They often noted that they didn't the studies that the medicine analysis that they looked at, they acknowledged that they weren't able to identify what type of carbohydrates they were replacing. So they could have been replacing the carbohydrates with refined carbs, which I wouldn't agree uh, is beneficial at all. I agree that stuff like refined carbs or sugar is probably not a good thing. But replacing it with things like potatoes or replacing it things like with types of other types of vegetables, I think would show more favorable outcomes, and you can see this in like plant-based diet RCTs.
Yeah, and I put in my little presentation at the bottom that I think you can cure heart disease and even some insulin resistance conditions by going on a vegan vegetarian diet that's low enough in carbohydrates and doesn't combine both
These
carbs
are
and fats.
higher carbohydrate diets.
Right, and that's why I
These
brought
aren't
up Denise Minger. She's got an interesting perspective on the other side of things. I mean, like I said, humans are built to be in both metabolisms at different parts of the year. if you look at seasonal availability metrics, like we just could not eat carbohydrates all the damn time up until about 10,000 years ago. We just couldn't. We had them available seasonally. We had fruits available seasonally. We had various grains that we could ferment and prepare. Other nuts had a little bit of carbohydrates. I mean, I'm more or less advocating you can intermittently be on a high carbohydrate diet. But again, I come back to what is a principal cause of nearly all the disease that we have today. It's hyperinsulinemia. It's excessive amounts of carbohydrates driving inflammation and dysfunction in all different metabolic processes and lipid regulation processes. That is the determining factor of heart disease. It's not just plain old LDL causing everything.
Then we just are going to just continue to disagree, because I still believe that high amounts of elevated LDL, whether it's oxidized or not, is still a contributor, or it's still a has a causal role in the damage to the endothelial. And I'm still gonna, keep that message until, or hold that position until you tell me it's wrong.
Okay, I mean, I guess we can end it here then. Like my final point, we're just going to do a summation of what we think is more or less optimal. Clearly, going on a ketogenic diet is going to be most beneficial for reducing your insulin resistance. You can also go on a vegan vegetarian diet that's low enough in carbohydrates to improve your insulin resistance, but principally a ketogenic diet would do it best. And also regulate a bunch of other important epigenetic functions that increase glutathione, which is an important antioxidant for protecting against heart disease too, for lowering the level of blood triglycerides, which is also very important for preventing heart disease. Should try to get outside a lot, get a lot of sunlight to increase nitric oxide to lower your blood pressure and also reduce the damaging effects of potential amounts of carbohydrates. Having enough vitamin D is important for that, getting enough magnesium, making sure that you exercise. I mean, all these things have causal factors in reducing your heart disease risk, and it's the sum total of all these things together where you eat a nutrient-dense diet, rich in animal foods, fat-soluble vitamins, omega-3s, in combination with sweating frequently, with getting sunlight, etc. So my point is, if you want to deal with most of the chronic disease that we have today, including heart disease, keep the carbohydrates low, fast intermittently, and exercise, I guess. That's all I have.
Okay, and then I just still I'd still hold the position that LDL has a causal factor, and it has been, or specifically elevated LDL has a causal role in atherosclerosis, and it has been shown by many epidemiological studies, genetic studies, clinical intervention studies, and yeah, I'm still not convinced that it's not.
I mean, we never even got into the specific types of LDL, like just native LDL compared to oxidized or small dense LDL, like how that impact, like how that whole thing coalesces into what actually makes a foam cell and an atherosclerotic plaque. Like native LDL is not in the foam cells. You know that, right? Like native LDL does not exist in the immune system foam cell that makes what atherosclerosis plaques are.
Right. So the process is, after the endothelial is damaged, the native LDL can get into the cell wall, and then it becomes oxidized in there. That's where some of the oxidation happens. Oxidation happens on the outside as well, but it's not as prevalent. But it depends on the type of oxidization and the type of LDL, because in the blood we have antioxidant properties that actually diffuse LDL, but in some cases it doesn't as quickly as it should. So yeah, native LDL does and has been shown to get into the endothelial. Yes, it has.
Can you link? Because the foam cells, the only way that LDL can be picked up by a macrophage into a foam cell is if it's oxidized, a small dense LDL, or if it's glycated.
It gets into the endothelial and then it becomes oxidized.
Dude, there's no study showing that native LDL is what consists in a foam cell. And even if you look, like, there's even like, have you looked at the constituents of what types of fats are actually in heart disease plaques? Like, it's not saturated fat in there. It's all polyunsaturated fats.
Actually, I think I have a paper on that as well. Hold on. I don't think that's the case.
Stand by. I got a link for it.
Okay. And then I have, so this basically explains, I don't like doing this, but this is basically the mechanistic explanation of how oxidized LDL and it's role in atherosclerosis. So I'll show you the part where it talks about a native LDL.
All right, found it. So I was going to VC test. So what is the primary constituent of human aortic plaques? Large-scale studies. So how long-term dietary intake of essential fatty acids affect the fatty acid content of aortic plaques is not clear. We compared the fatty acid composition of aortic plaques with that of post-mortem serum and adipose tissue, in which essential fatty acid content reflects dietary intake. Positive associations were found between serum and plaque omega-6 and omega-3 polyunsaturated fats and monosaturates, and also between adipose tissue and plaque omega-3 6 unsaturated fatty acids. No associations were found with saturated fatty acids. These findings imply a direct influence of dietary polyunsaturated fatty acids on aortic plaque formation and suggest that the current trends favoring increased intake of polyunsaturated fatty acids should be reconsidered. That is pretty clear fucking cut, considering that what makes the fat in your arteries that causes heart disease is not saturated fats. It's not.
Well, I would probably disagree on that, but I'm gonna look at this paper real quick. But I guess that's pretty much it, right?
Yep, I guess so. Thanks for debating, man. If you want to talk about anything else instead of cardiovascular disease, I'm happy to do it. A lot of other cool topics of health that we could talk about, just not cardiovascular
So who
disease.
won, dude?
Josh, you can fuck yourself.
What?
You dick.
I just want to know who won the debate.
No one won. We were just talking, trying to learn.
We didn't
really debates.
Neither of us really convinced each other of the opposite opinion.
Damn, yeah, that's a pretty shit debate then. I'm gonna declare myself the winner since none of you guys are. I won the debate.
Semantic bullshit.
No, we're all winners here. Is the debate ended, gentlemen?
Sorry,
yeah.
Where are we at?
All right, does anyone have any questions whatsoever for the two people who were debating?
I gotta leave in a few minutes too, so.
I mean, if he's leaving immediately, it's a bit pointless.
Actually,
I was just going to ask.
I have a quick question.
Shoot your questions. Like I said, I gotta leave at 8:30, so I got like 15, 20 minutes.
I mean, you should probably go ahead, but I just wanted to question him on the Ucchi Ravenskov study that he keeps presenting, and a whole lot of the other.
I presented it once at the very beginning of the debate when we were talking about LDL being a causal factor.
Yeah,
It was not
Dolan, what do you think
thing.
about vaccines?
If it's,
I think they're important. I think they can be beneficial, but if you give vaccines to a sick person that doesn't have enough fat-soluble vitamins, who's metabolically disabled, who's dealing with other toxicities or heavy metals, I think they could be damaging. It just depends on the context of the person's health.
Do you think someone could have autism from a vaccine?
I think people can have autism from aluminum, which is in some vaccines.
Isn't there also mercury in them? It's like a bunch of
some. But I do think
dumping metal into someone's blood. It doesn't seem very healthy.
There was a study on autoimmune disease and some vaccines being implicated because of the protein and adjuvants they use. Like certain people can develop egg allergies because they use an egg white avidin protein in some vaccines. There is a beef extract. I can't remember the name of it, but it's also been associated with people having autoimmune reactions to certain foods. I think it's a lot more complicated than just vaccines cause autism. I don't think they innately cause autism. I think if you're a healthy person that has enough glutathione with a proper diet, you can successfully detoxify the adjuvants. But if you give a vaccine to a sick person, it's going to make them sicker. They don't fix your health. They can be potentially detrimental.
sorry, yeah, I was going to say about the Ravenskov one. If I've shown you that it's problematic, should you be presenting it at all? Because it seems to be a mishmash of cherry-picked studies.
I mean, we can say the same thing about all the cholesterol research too. I mean, nearly every one of the people that puts out that research is from the American Heart Association or other agriculturally regulatory captured associations that have a lot of funding from all the food conglomerates. Like it just there's corruption everywhere, so you can pinpoint.
Yeah. So what I said to you when we initially had this discussion was that I showed you that there was actually contradicting evidence in the studies that he provided, in that it contradicted the claims that he was making, and additionally he had cherry picked certain sections of the study which presented in his favor and ignored large amounts of other parts of the studies.
Okay.
So
it doesn't discount all the other studies on LDL being associated with longer lifespans or HDL. Like it.
So I tried to point this out to you that all-cause mortality is different from cardiovascular disease, right?
It's not reverse causation either. If you look at Dave Feldman's research
I'm not talking about reverse.
Data, it's not reverse causation.
I'm not talking about reverse causation. So you can have an intervention which reduces LDL and reduces cardiovascular disease events, but increases all-cause mortality events. That's different. That's different.
Oh no, Semantic. I feel like your whole thing was really hinging on the vaccine thing, and you didn't really go for that. So I feel like you kind of lost the debate. Semantic bullshit. I think debate over.
That's all right. Yeah. So I'm not sure. I'll see if I can
but
maybe draw up some graphs.
Vaccines have prevented a lot of disease. Like I don't disagree with that. They've cured a lot of important diseases that we
like Dolan saw that coming and just like he was ready for it. Like Semantic had a good plan, but good plans don't always work out. So I think we need to just bury the hatchet there, Semantic.
People always try to equate those that look at the naturalistic fallacies as being against vaccines. I'm not.
Dude, why is it bad to be skeptical about someone putting a needle and pumping chemicals into your arm? I'm skeptical of that. The fuck, like. Any rational person would be.
Yeah. Just because you say there's some consequences doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I don't think.
I agree. Yeah, like it hurts my arm when I get a shot, but I still get the shot. You know.
I don't know. I know the statistics on flu vaccine effectiveness make me definitely not want to get one. They don't do shit. They do not help.
I would disagree with that statement wholeheartedly. But
Dolan, you're sliding down the hill, dude.
Dude, there is not good research showing the strains change every year.
You're correct. The strains do change, but it's not like they use the same flu vaccine every year.
I know that. They change it depending on the year. I'm saying they're not effective. Go look at any study on flu vaccine.
Oh no, it depends year by year. Sometimes they're very effective, sometimes they're not. You cannot get 100% coverage on flu. It's too adaptive, but it will reduce the severity of the flu you get. Or if you're lucky, you'll actually block the flu. No one has ever said that flu vaccine is perfect.
You get the flu from it. I've had that happen to me twice every time I got the flu vaccine.
From it. Nice try. That is a lie.
I got sick as hell for like 2 weeks after I got a flu vaccine when I was 14, and then again when I was 16.
Is it not possible that you already caught the flu and then got the vaccine? It just wasn't effective.
No. Like the same day I got the shot, I got sick that very same day. But I mean, you could just look at the long-term correlations with old people getting vaccines and increasing all-cause mortality. I mean, why would something so beneficial for
using it on old people is an incredibly bad metric because they already have compromised.
When you go to the physician to get a flu shot, they do warn you that you can get like a mild case of the flu from it.
Yeah, do you want to know why they do that? No, do you want to know why they do that? Because it's a lot easier to say you may catch a mild case of the flu than you're going to have an immune response potentially that may make it feel like it's the
bullshit
flu.
Thing I got sick.
Lying.
No, you already had the flu. It just happened to be in a hibernetic state until you probably had a stress action like get a shot. Do you know anything about the human body?
Yes, I do.
I'm willing to believe you don't.
This guy talks like Batman.
If you want to talk about immunological function and how adjuvants can stimulate your immune system and cause reactions, perhaps I didn't get the flu. Perhaps I just had an adjuvant reaction on my body. Really just went into hyperimmune sensitivity mode.
Reaction?
I got sick. An immunological reaction from the adjuvants?
I'm sorry. Say that one more. You're actually very quiet. That's the issue.
Immunological reaction. Is that clear?
So what you're saying is you had a febrile reaction.
Perhaps. I'm saying that maybe the adjuvants in the vaccines can stimulate your immune system in a negative manner that simulates a flu. Very similar symptoms.
So you didn't have
maybe we can meet halfway here and say that he had
semantic bullshit
15 years ago.
No, it is not semantic bullshit. There's a vast difference.
Well, you're kind of
there's a difference between an immune response and having a virus.
It happened like over a decade ago. I mean, that's kind of unfair. I think he was like 14. He said he probably wouldn't like study it all that well. He got a flu shot. He got sick. He exhibited symptoms of the flu. Occam's razor would suggest that the flu shot may have potentially given him some flu symptoms.
Actually, no. Occam's razor suggests that he already had the flu.
Yeah, because with any virus, even with like the common cold and stuff like that, we know that there's a hibernating period where you would have already been exposed to it, and then it won't show up. Symptoms don't show up for 2-3 days. That's what Dred's saying. This is like a pretty basic thing.
Well, the 2018 flu shot had 17% effectiveness.
Okay. I'm not denying that. That doesn't actually say the flu shot's bad. It just means that one was particularly poorly done. They make new ones every year.
I linked a study called Vaccine-Induced Autoimmunity, the role of molecular mimicry in immune function.
I agree with Bird on this part of it. Like, I do think that the flu shot is probably an overall net gain. Like, I get one every year. I don't think they're bad for you, but I think it's inaccurate to say that they can't possibly make you sick, because there's a lot of people that...
The most likely thing that's going to happen to you if you have a flu shot, all right, is you're going to have a febrile reaction. It's basically you're having an allergic reaction. It happens, or you'll have you'll exhibit the symptoms of having an immunological. God, I can't say that word. Your immune system will activate, and it will simulate the stereotypical infection symptoms like increased body temperature.
Right.
Sweating,
I feel like
cold
you're kind of
sweats,
picking
cough.
apart.
These things are normal for any immune response.
Right. I think we agree on that.
But
I think
they can persist.
But that's not actually having the fucking flu, no matter how much Dolan wants it to be.
No, dude, I said I got sick.
Not
I didn't
literal flu.
No, you said you got the flu, Dolan. You got the. You said you had the
like
flu.
the flu. I felt sick as fuck, high fever, cold shivers, like all the same symptoms of the flu. It could have been some just immunological reaction. Regardless, it's semantics. I felt like shit after I got a flu shot, and that's not.
I'm sorry you felt bad, but it doesn't make you right.
He didn't say that I contracted influenza from my flu shot. Like you're kind of strawmanning.
It literally is semantic bullshit. Like it literally is.
He got the shot.
It really isn't.
So good.
It is because what makes something the flu? If you get a flu virus in you, whether it's dead or alive, and then you get like symptoms of the flu, you could say you got the flu, even if
you really cannot.
Semantically, you could.
You really cannot. That is a load of garbage.
No. There's several different diseases that actually have similar symptoms, right? There's a difference between having the influenza virus and some other disease. This is an important thing to point out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just because you feel bad doesn't actually mean that you're actually infected with something. So you felt bad. Well, that sucks. I'm sorry you felt bad. It doesn't mean that you
he's not sorry.
I'm not actually. You're right. I'm not sorry at all. Get tougher and deal with being sick. It's part of life. You can defend yourself through vaccines,
or you can just get sunlight.
Or get healthy and not.
There's studies on vitamin D levels being more effective than the flu vaccine. That's
a different argument.
That's an entirely different argument.
That's fine.
No, you're essentially trying to advocate for getting a flu vaccine and just dealing with the sickness when I could just not get the flu vaccine and go outside and have.
You can do both actually, and that would just actually be more effective.
And at the same time, I'm advocating for the flu vaccine because it's proven to be effective.
I don't know. I haven't had the flu since I was 16, so.
Well, that's congratulations. You have a good immune system. Not everyone does. I'm so glad that all you care about is yourself, you selfish prick.
I did not have a good immune system. That's the thing.
Well, that was for 2018.
17%. Okay. It's not that effective, I guess.
Nope, and it kills
old
old
people. 2018 it wasn't.
Increases all-cause mortality in old people by like 30-something%.
Why are you constantly talking about old people who have, God damn it, they have impaired immune systems? What the fuck
why
is
give
wrong
them a vaccine? then why give why would you give someone who has an impaired immune system? And that was my whole point, is that if you have a fucked up immune system where you're sick,
There's usually like
don't
an
give vaccines.
They don't usually give it to old people,
If it has to
dude.
do with people who have impaired immune systems, there are very specific vaccines that they use. Now, I'll take a look. This is just vitamin D for influenza. By all means, go out and get some vitamin D. That'll be great. But I would also like to have the additional defense of having, the vaccine, because it's not going to hurt me.
Well, you can get an autoimmune disease.
And also, Dolan, I would also say that it doesn't surprise me that it could cause harm to old people if they have a allergic reaction to the vaccine. Yeah, that could potentially kill
Who else?
them.
Who else could it cause harm to?
They don't give the same flu shot to like old people as they do to like
they
young
don't.
people. There's like several different versions of it that they give based on your age and other issues that you might have.
The one that they give to the old people is called cyanide.
Regardless, my point was we give vaccines out way too willy-nilly without evaluating the health of the person first and their immunological reactions, their reactivity, how they respond.
Hold on. That wasn't your point.
I think we should
that wasn't your point,
before we
Dolan.
give them vaccines.
Your point was I got the flu shot and I got the flu. You're totally moving the goalpost here.
You're hinging on him saying he got the flu instead of he got sick.
Yeah,
like,
Dolan
it's not my fault. He was fucking wrong.
Dolan did not say that he had influenza or that he got it from the shot. He said he got the shot and then he felt sick for like 2 weeks. That's like you're kind of strawmanning him there. Like,
no, I'm really not. This is the implication that he's made.
You're still focusing
on that one.
I'm like.
Well, he's the one changing his argument. So I don't see why I
Myth man, I'm on your side here. Like I'm on your side of the argument, but you are strawmanning Dolan on that point.
Okay, the issue is he's moving the goalpost. I'm keeping him on point. That's the difference.
Or you're just an ideologue.
He already addressed that point and said that like it didn't necessarily mean he had influenza. He never said that he did in the first place.
So what was the point you were trying to make then, Dolan?
The first thing that I said, like when you asked about whether or not I think they're good, I said that vaccines can be, yes, beneficial for preventing certain diseases, but I think that we're too aggressive with the amount that we give without testing people for their health status, what their immunological reactions could possibly be, what their glutathione levels are. All these things are really important factors in determining how fucked up you can get from a vaccine.
I suppose then my only response to that could be is I actually see the logic in your statement. I'm not going to actually. There's nothing in that statement that I actually disagree with because I think we're over medicated as is. I have a lot more faith in doctors, but I am biased on that note. There are definitely bad doctors out there and more bad doctors than I like to believe.
Cool.
Dolan, I have a question for you.
What's up?
I'm vegan. On the high carb note, you were saying that consumption of high carbs leads to like excess insulin, like hyperinsulinemia or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Why do you think that like there's not really that high of a like rate of type 2 diabetes amongst vegans when it's pretty much like everyone's eating high carb? I mean,
because
there are like obviously like
manifest. It doesn't happen immediately. Like it's not something that just happens in a week if you go on a high carb diet. It takes a long time. Like usually insulin resistance doesn't show up. I mean, everyone talks about how they get fat in their 30s. You're eating a lifelong diet of high carbohydrates, which most kids are these days, and they continue doing that into older life. The insulin resistance develops much later in life, depending on your genetics and your carbohydrate tolerance. Like some people get it in their early 20s, some people get it in their late 50s. Like it takes a while to manifest depending on a lot of things.
Yeah, but the Adventist health study was like most of those people were vegan their whole life, and there was really no rate of type 2 diabetes amongst them.
Okay, and was this like a 4-year study? And how old were they? Were they eating
were vegan
for their entire life?
Yeah, they're Adventists. They're vegan for religious purposes. So like they're basically born vegan. Like they're one of like they're a very small population, obviously, but
I don't know if you actually read that the Adventist Health Study thoroughly because they actually lumped the types of diet, like they didn't lump them by the like kind of thing that they identified as. They mostly lumped them around the kind of diets they had. So most of them were vegetarian.
Yeah, but their type 2 diabetes rate was like still significantly
low.
lower.
Yeah, as compared to omnivores.
And they had that diet their whole life. So, you're saying they're going to develop it after a while from the high carbs. I mean, I'm looking at a study right now that compared Western people who are already like athletic and in good shape and compared them to sedentary vegans. And sedentary vegans had lower levels of insulin.
There's a couple of things to notice with these arguments. Like, first thing is that a lot of the time they tend to equate every kind of carb. So you can have a high carb diet and eat, fries and lollies and Coke and stuff like that. And obviously that's going to increase your risk of diabetes. Whereas if you're eating, fruits and veggies and stuff like that, that's also a high carb diet, but I don't think that's likely to give you type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is, I mean, all these vegans who are eating essentially a high carb diet, like, I don't feel like there's a distinction that's being made clear enough between high, like, junky processed carbs and processed oils. And then like whole food, kids are not eating, carbs from strawberries and apples and like baked potatoes. They're eating carbs from like bread and shit.
Yeah, I just want to point out as well that Dolan didn't actually. I don't think he presented any evidence for what he was saying. He just sort of said it, and it wasn't presented. So it'd be interesting to see where he's actually getting this evidence from, because the ones that I've seen where they say something like this, if you look at the study, there's no differentiation between things like apples versus like gummy bears and stuff.
They don't identify the type of carbohydrate. That often happens.
Wrong study.
The problem, that's a huge problem in a lot of these keto or low carb diets where they compare the two. Yeah, exactly. Oh wait, no, that's different.
Yeah, man, right there, like lower levels of insulin. Like there's just being a huge conflation being made, and like no one's really saying anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. You've actually pointed out part of the problem.
Like, dude, like I'll tell you, man, I eat 80% carbs. Like, I'm not fucking getting type 2 diabetes anytime soon, man. Like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I've seen these people who have type 2 diabetes. I look nothing like them.
You don't have to be fat to get type 2 diabetes.
No, that's fair. Yeah,
but
that's why BMI was declared to like not like 100% sure. Like
for it though.
Yeah, like you're saying, high carbs this causes type 2 diabetes. Like, there's vegans have been like epidemiologically like concluded to not have high rates of type 2 diabetes, and we all eat high carbs.
I even have a paper on a randomized control trial for a plant-based diet where they used it specifically for diabetic patients. So
you also said that the blue zones eat cheese, which is not true. Like 100%.
I have no idea if it's true. I didn't even see it as relevant. So I didn't really a lot of you guys kept telling me that I'm missing stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that I just didn't care to even pick at because I just didn't feel it was relevant. Like I'll just let it slide. I'm more interested in one specific topic at a time.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm gonna say you had like a landslide coming at you. That's like not a fair debate.
That would have been the first thing that I'd point out, is that you sort of let him gish gallop a bit. Like, I understand you should be polite to an extent, but you should also point out when he's sort of gish galloping. and just like pin him to one.
I don't know, Dolan. You said a lot of shit, dude. I asked you a simple question.
What'd you ask him? I wasn't here.
If he says that high carb diet leads to type 2 diabetes, then why do the Adventist vegans like have the by far like the lowest rates of type 2 diabetes, and they are basically vegan their whole life?
I wouldn't even say that. I would just ask him to provide the evidence to begin with, because he's making the claim.
Well, he's like making a mechanistic like bullshit like conversation point that doesn't really have anything to do with it. Like none of us are like biological experts to talk about mechanisms in depth. Like we need like more simple data to look at, and there's plenty of that.
It's not even that. Like I don't know what the issue is with mechanistic data, other than like that it's just one part of the puzzle, right? It's not very convincing.
Just because it is doesn't mean that
I know
something else is like
it
the
is
way.
the
Like,
case. I totally agree. Like just because we find a mechanism in a test tube does not mean it's going to translate in a human setting. I totally agree.
can you send me all those links that he sent you?
I read. Me?
Yeah. I didn't see them being posted. Are they public or something?
Oh, they're in VC links. I think you can go to them.
Oh, okay.
Go into that.
I'm an idiot. Holy God. I read through a Reddit post that had like almost 100 links showing like, you know, like vegans are deficient in this and that, and it's like completely all garbage. Like 2-week studies on mice.
Mice though.
Yeah.
Rat
I know what you're talking about. I had a discussion not too long ago about DHA. Vegans. So does anyone else have an opinion on the original topic at all?
Not particularly. I think Ucchi, you did a very bad job of defending your position.
Did a bad job at like, what do you mean by that? Like, I didn't present my position well, or?
I think you presented your position fine. I think that you're not very good at challenging things that are incoming at you, especially falsehoods that are incoming at you.
I mean, I don't really debate much.
Yeah, we
I'm
can
slowly
tell.
starting to do that, I guess.
I'll give you some advice. Most debates on the internet are an Ouroboros, where the tail is a gish galop and the head is a flashcard. So if you want to defeat the gish galop, you start flashcarding like nothing else.
Okay.
I don't know what flashcarding is, but basically just tell them to choose their best one and then pin them on that.
No. You don't do that because that makes you look stupid. You want to gish galop. Like it's a good tactic on online. Not in real debates, sure. But like we're talking about internet debates here. Gish galop is a good tactic. But you have to counter it. That's why I say it's an Ouroboros.
I would strongly oppose that. So
Just
point out that they're gish galloping and just pin them on one thing.
But the flashcard
and that way you can actually get to a point.
Here's an actual like suggestion, like in debates, if you actually know what you're talking about, you're just gonna win. It sounds obvious.
Well, that doesn't really pan out because people bring up random shit.
You really think that like these guys would like go up to like one of the vegan doctors and just start debating him and like just start like dropping all these points? Like they would just get like slaughtered. It wouldn't even be funny. Like this is fucking Discord, dude. Like, yeah, like which he like doesn't debate. Like he's not talking to a real doctor who's treated thousands of people for type 2 diabetes. Like, are you serious?
Sure, but
Depends on the
like
topic, bro.
I said we were talking about internet debates. I said this isn't.
Oh
a real,
yeah,
like,
no. That's
I
fair.
clarified that at the start. I think if you were to have a real
My
sit-down
interjection,
time
sorry.
debate with a judge and a moderator, like, I mean, like, these debate, like, the type of debates that happen online, you don't have the same type of moderator, so it's a different context altogether, honestly. I'm saying for internet debates, it's an Ouroboros where the tail is Gishgalop and the head is flashcarding. It's an endless loop where those two things chase each other, and the only way to win is to be the master of flashcarding. Like, Ucchi, if you want some advice, I'm going to give you some unsolicited advice, whether you want it or not. When Dolan said that there haven't been vegans for more than 60 years, that was your best opportunity right there. Just flashcard him on, just ask him to list like all these various different societies and civilizations in which he knows that there weren't vegans, and he has to prove that because he made a claim there, and you can flashcard him on that claim that goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Like you had so much ammunition there. That was your best chance to win the debate, and you didn't take it.
I don't know. I was more interested in one specific topic rather than talking about something else like that.
But internet debates aren't about one specific topic. Internet debates are about the Gishgalop. Like, that's why Dolan won, because he knows how to Gishgalop and you don't. Like, you kept talking about like LDL and like cholesterol or whatever. Like, I literally don't even know what your position is, because like I was so flooded with just information the whole time from just like both sides about like just random shit, and that's what always happens in internet debates. Like, you have to be able to flashcard on a variety of topics, like anything that's tangentially related to what you're talking. This is why I like, even though I don't debate, I could probably win any debate because I'm very good at flashcarding people, and that's what I'm trying to teach you how to do, is how to flashcard so you can defeat the Gishgalop. You identify the weakest link in the Gishgalop and you flashcard it into oblivion, and that's how you defeat it. And you can say you're not interested in that, and that's fine, but then you shouldn't debate online, because online debates with an audience, like if it was a one-on-one with just you and Dolan, that would be different. But like with an audience, it's just a bunch of people that look at you like an idiot now. Like, we all just think you lost a debate against, Dolan of all people, and that's cringe.
Ucchi, I want to talk.
Yeah.
Are you on the Ask Yourself server?
No. I got removed.
Oh.
That place is pretty cringy.
I want to. Yeah, it's pretty bad for sure. I want to talk to you somewhere. I'm new here.
I'm in the server, so you can talk to me here.
Anytime I go to Ask Yourself, they just want to argue with me about veganism. I just don't care, like, at all. I literally just don't care.
I mean, it's a vegan server, though.
Yeah, you're not allowed to just like sit in there and jack off or do whatever. They don't let you do anything. It's like, are you willing to defend that position? Well, if not, then you must not.
There's plenty of people
your
that
position is
sit
invalid.
there, but you can't sit there and chat shit in the text.
I don't even chat shit. I'll just be sitting in there, like in the voice chat, just like chilling.
So how do these like debates get set up?
Oh, I actually told Dolan that I felt that a lot of the times I went to the Frank Stefano server, and I saw that guy Dolan. I didn't know who he was, but he seemed to like link a lot of stuff, and I looked through a lot of it, and then he would say that this rat study would fit in a human setting, and I would just tell him, well, that's not how that works at all. Do you have a human setting study? And then he'd say, well, what's wrong with the animal study? And I'm like, well, we're not rats, for one. And then that kind of went from there, and then he wanted to debate me on cardio heart disease.
I kind of just want to debate him right now. Like, he says he's gonna go, but like, dude, I'm not gonna lie. Like that debate was pretty cringe. Like, he was just saying a bunch of shit and like pulling the whole mechanism, like sparkle in your eye. Like he's saying so much shit that you just like you can't respond to it, and if you don't, you're in that much deeper of a hole at that point. Like that's kind of what Josh was saying.
Well, I thought my main issue was just like he would say stuff, and then I would try to I would try to talk about it, and then he'd go on to something else.
Yeah, you have to just like hammer away and like just like be consistent. And when you say stuff, you have to be like attacking him when you're saying it, like, and be like attack that one point specifically and call him out. Like I can tell you specifically, he mentioned this Thomas Dayspring guy. Like he was just like laundry listing these doctors, just like assuming that they're fucking credible. I looked this guy up. He runs some kind of for-profit fucking lab center that does like cardiovascular labs, like for fucking profit. Like he's referencing people in like the pharma industry who are making shit tons of money. Like that's a terrible point. Like you gotta just like hammer away. Whereas like on the vegan side, like a lot of Dean Ornish's work, like he runs a non-profit center and he has literally published studies saying people are cured of type 2 diabetes.
Thanks.